Hello, and welcome to the Assembly Line, an NES homebrew podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Kevin from Kahan Games.
And I'm Beau from Soul Goose Productions.
And we're here once again to talk about homebrews. There's been some chatter lately, Beau, from new people sort of coming into the fold.
Yeah, that's been one of the exciting things to see is that kind of within the last year, a lot of new people have kind of entered the community. And it's a lot of people who are doing things, they're talking about things, and they're just genuinely interested in what's going on.
But they're talking about things that we've sort of discussed, not necessarily on this podcast, but, you know, we as the homebrew scene have discussed in pretty good length in the past.
Yeah. Well, you know, the homebrew scene's been going for over 20 years now, so we've kind of covered a lot of topics, and a lot of the things that have been raised over the last few months have been issues that have been talked about over the years, kind of at times to death, and at other times not so much. But there's, you know, as they say, nothing new under the sun in some ways.
That could be true, but, you know, when we started, you know, thinking about some of this stuff, it was very easy to sort of say, oh, we already came up with an answer for that question, but you almost have to go back and reevaluate things now.
Oh, I would more than agree. As helpful as it is for kind of new people to understand that these things have been discussed, I think it's even more helpful for those of us that have already been around the block. Wow, that's never good. Those of us that have been around to kind of realize that maybe the conversations themselves have changed.
Yeah.
As the community has changed.
Can we give any concrete examples of specific topics?
Well, I've seen some talk lately on the Twitter and on the forums about the use of donors in manufacturing homebrew games, which means what, Kevin?
Well, I mean, it means repurposing old games and basically putting a new game on that cartridge.
Kind of like organs, yeah. Donors.
Yeah.
You know, you put it on your license.
You're taking a cartridge out of circulation for good and repurposing it for some new project.
Yeah, you're taking awesome games like, Mega Man 3 and 5 and Little Samson, things like that?
Well, probably not. I would say more toward probably taking a game like...
Just say it.
Silent Service?
Yes! Like Silent Service. The garbage of the NES library.
Play action football. One of those, you know, games that everyone had that there's thousands and millions of
junk.
Yes, lots of junk. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and these games, when I got into things in 2013, I could go into like the worst resale shops in town and pick them up for $0.25 a piece. So I had boxes full of ice hockey and golf and whatever else, because I knew that the boards could be used for simple homebrews relatively easily. And how's the conversation about donors changed over the years, do you think? I mean, let's go way back to like early to mid 2000s, kind of in the middle period of 2010 to 2015, and then now.
Well, I mean, in the early sort of NES homebrew scene, donors were really the only way that you could put your project onto a real cartridge to play on an actual, you know, real hardware. You know, back before new parts were manufactured by Retro USB and Infinite NES Lives, like, you had to repurpose these cartridges. And back when, you know, when the original Garage Cart came out, you know, didn't they use donors to put that out?
Oh yeah, those were all made with SMB Duck Hunt donor, or maybe they were just SMB donors. I forget. But
then you sort of went into the second wave of NES homebrew releases when those new parts were coming out. You know, you could use brand new PCB boards and brand new shells and sort of present your fancy game on a colored cartridge to the world. And yeah, I mean, it was exciting times. You didn't have to destroy games anymore, and a lot of people were against that. You know, they didn't want, even though there's billions of these cartridges laying around, they didn't want any taken out of circulation.
Yeah, which is honestly a little ridiculous, but you know, whatever. But yeah, until INL actually made the flash boards where you could, you know, easily reprogram a board, even with retro USB boards, you still had to learn how to solder. You had to order chips from, you know, used chips from some Chinese supplier, and it wasn't easy. So if you're going to order chips and go to all that trouble and still have to do the soldering, you might as well just go pay 25 cents for, a shell and a PCB that you can use. That's way cheaper than buying a brand new PCB and shell. Like the economics of it really supported. I mean, Al Bailey did Sudoku on donors, and a lot of other people use donors up until, the whole flashboard thing is kind of what changed it.
So is that still the case right now? Are people still primarily using all new parts for their releases?
Well, yeah, there was that big shift to using all new parts, and whether it's because you didn't want to destroy donors or whether you just wanted the ease of it all. But there's also kind of that backlash of somebody makes a game from scratch. They want to do everything themselves. That includes finding the shells, if they're, used in donors, but also the soldering process and the desoldering of a board and all that. Like that's like full maker mentality of like, you're going to do everything yourself. And I find it really hard to be negative towards that. If somebody wants to take 100 copies out of Silent Service out of circulation, I go for it. Like, you are doing something. You're actually almost doing value.
Us a favor.
Yeah, nobody's going to want these games. You go to antique stores and you see like 50 copies of Pac-Man for the 2600 and you go, nobody's ever going to love these carts. Nobody's ever going to even bother to fire them up to see if they work. And at least with a homebrew, you're giving something new life. So I think we're starting to see kind of that do-it-yourself mentality, like give value to that whole process. Whereas for a number of years, it was like, you should go support the people making new parts, and we should not be taking copies of Gemfire out of circulation for that MMC5 and whatever else. But I think now we've come to a nice happy medium of both coexisting. But maybe that's just me.
No, I mean, I agree with you. There's something sort of romantic about getting as DIY as you can get, like all the way down to the soldering of the chips. I mean, you're creating something.
And that's something that neither you or I have done. So it still has that sort of romanticism. We don't realize how much work goes into that.
Yeah, I tried to solder last week. It didn't go well.
Well, and just the economics of it. Like, it's nice to go support people making new parts like INL or Brian or whoever. If you can pay 25 cents to 50 cents for your parts, like that supports you making more games in many cases. So it's, I think every situation is unique. You got to kind of support people as they do things. But yeah, I don't know. End Silent Service.
What's another topic that we can reevaluate here?
Well, how about gamers versus collectors?
Okay.
What's the history on that one?
When homebrews started coming out, there was sort of a divide amongst people. There were people buying it because they wanted to actually sit down and play the game. And there were those that were buying it just so they could add another number to their collection total. So it was this sort of, people were buying them and that was great, but buying them just to put it on a shelf and, games are being resold years later that are still sealed. It's like, why did you even buy it in the first place?
Well, and in the beginning, there was the view that homebrews are being made by people today, which is true. And therefore, because of that, they will never be collectible. It's people artificially creating things that are limited. Things like Pink Lady Frogger, Kevin made 10. He could just make more tomorrow, so they'll never be collectible. And same with Sudoku. Al Bailey had some plans of like, well, I'm going to cease this run and we'll start a new one with new puzzles, and that'll make this or that more collectible or whatnot. People are like, no, this crap's never going to be collectible. This is junk. And over the years, we kind of saw that wasn't true. 2013, 2012 through like 2015, things became so expensive collecting-wise that new people almost couldn't join the community in terms of older releases.
Yeah, it got ridiculous. I mean, anyone, there were people putting out limited runs of just whatever they could get their hands on, and copies were just selling like hotcakes for astronomical prices. It was a great time to be a developer, and in some instances, it was a great time to be a collector. But it was very expensive to get into, for sure.
Yeah, and people talk about bubbles and all this. The bubbles burst, but in terms of homebrews, it genuinely did.
Yes.
Things got so expensive they could not be sustained at that level, and there just weren't that many people interested.
Yeah, and things have sort of evened out now, I think, for the most part. Stuff's going for sale for very I don't want to say affordable, but very much more affordable prices. So it's definitely easier now than ever to sort of get invested and play a lot of these games that came out in the past.
Yeah, nobody wants to hear like, oh, the bubbles burst, things are dropping, sell. But like at the same time, things were so artificially increased by a few people buying and selling things at astronomical prices that I think what we see now is much more realistic in terms of, if you want to play, you got to pay, which, that's kind of the rule, the pay to play thing. But you're actually paying a decent amount that isn't ridiculous.
And we've seen a sort of new avenue emerge in this sort of pay-to-play whole idea. People lately have started releasing ROMs, for a couple bucks or $10 or whatever online. So what do you think about that?
Whew, that ROM releases, almost more than anything, have had a storied past. Back in the late 90s, early 2000s, even up till Joe released, Membler's released Garage Cart in 2005, games were made, and this goes with emulators too, because initially with emulators, a guy or two tried to sell emulators, and then everybody else was like, no, emulators should be free. Let's make them free. And with that was ROMs. ROMs should also be free. Nobody should ever charge for a ROM. It should just be, this late 90s, everything's public domain, the internet's the wild frontier, and all that. It's a mentality, and you can see it in the history. If you go through the old threads and stuff, everything is free. That's why we have all the tools we have.
Right.
FCUX and YYCHR. Nobody's making these things to make money. They're making them because they can, and they're giving them to the community. And so games should also be that way, up until kind of the cart releases that started. And after that point, then, if you're going to put something on a cart, people stopped releasing the ROMs because they wanted to protect the cart.
Yeah, and I think that there was some sort of resistance to that idea, but I think when people started caring about, these games that people were putting out, they quickly came to the developers' defense. Like, hey, we should be paying these people money. They put hours and hours into creating this. Like, we need to show them that we care and we support them. So that was sort of a seismic shift. But I think things are almost starting to go the other way now to some degree.
What we're seeing is a lot of people don't, for a number of years it was, all original hardware, and you get the NES, and then you get the AVS or you get the analog, and
analog NT.
Everything's pure. But a lot of people today, I think, are playing on devices that run with ROMs, hacked PSPs or Wii's or whatever other Android things are out there, and they don't care for the cart. They want to see the ROM.
Well, yeah, they're bringing their hacked PSPs on the go, to play on their lunch break at work. Like, their gaming time might not necessarily be like 2 hours in front of their TV at home,
Yeah.
You have to sort of start catering to how people play games.
Well, that's been a big shift. Because I know I was very anti-ROM release, and I think you were too.
Absolutely.
But I'm starting to reevaluate that. Things like, Micromages was the most obvious recent example of 1,400 people were like, we just want the ROM. It's like, oh, really? Okay. I've always, over the years, I've gotten 5 or 10 people per project that are like, hey, give me the ROM, you fool. And I'm like, that's not very nice.
That's not the way to go about it.
Yeah. I'm not giving you anything. But I'm starting to wonder if there is a service to perform for these people that just want to play ROMs and still want to support the developer. I think that's a key part of this, is that they don't want you to just give them the ROM. They want to pay $5 or $10 and support you in what you're doing, but also actually be able to play it in the way they prefer.
Now, what do people like you or I do, when we are primarily making our games on like GT-ROM, where that isn't necessarily supported in a wide variety of emulators, like some of the features we're using? Like, when we go to release ROMs of our games, like, how do we do that, and where the games will actually play the way they're meant to be played?
That's oddly enough been a question I've been debating lately with Spookatron. If I released it as a ROM, you wouldn't be able to play it. Nobody would, because GT-ROM does certain things that can't be that are not currently emulated in emulators, which, Brad Smith has done a lot of work to kind of rectify. But I think the easiest way would be, at least in my case, would be to convert things to the MMC1 or some sort of mapper that had additional features.
Yeah.
And, GT-ROM has been great because it gets us away from the old clunky battery-backed hold reset while you power off so you don't corrupt all your RAM. Like, it's gotten us away from that. Flash saving is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But because it's not always emulated, or the fixed bank isn't emulated or things like that, like, actually going back to the MMC1 solves most of those issues, and it's pretty easy.
That's true. That's a good point. I asked that for purely selfish reasons that we'll get into later in the episode.
Well, that is my purely selfish answer as I debate these questions. I wasn't expecting you to ask that. Good for you. Kudos, sir.
Got to keep you on your toes, Beau.
Yeah, I'm always thinking.
So what else we got here? Would you say that homebrews are as collectible as they once were?
Yeah, I think something is always collectible if somebody wants to collect it. And the more people that want to collect it, the more desirable it becomes, collectible it becomes.
Do you think that the vast success of a game like Micro Mages, do you think that the crowd that found that game is any of that crowd going to sort of seep into the backlog of homebrews that we've already released in the past?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you look at it, somebody likes Mega Man and Mario and whatnot, and then they start looking for other things they might like. And so as new people join the community, I can only imagine that they're going to start looking at past things going, man, I got to have that. I don't know if we'll ever see the prices we did of 2015. Wow. I can almost guarantee we'll see the prices at some point, but that could be 20 or 30 or 40 years out.
Yeah.
As things become more sparse. But as a whole, we've seen new people getting into collecting, and it's an uphill battle. Even when I started in 2013, when there were only probably 50 games out, it was still an uphill battle because that was 50 games I had to go find, and the prices were just off the charts, $100 a pop at least. So yeah, and that's shifted over the years. It went from being those of us that got into it in 2012, 2013. It was a huge financial uphill battle, and now today it's more of an uphill battle in terms of quantity.
Yeah, just finding some of these games at this point is getting hard, and it's going to only get harder.
Oh, that's the biggest thing. If you want to try to find them all, good luck, because finding them is the hardest part. You got to track down owners, you got to track down, what the value is, everything. You got to make sure it's not a fake, which becomes increasingly hard. Some things weren't even numbered. You got to know exactly what you're buying. You got to do your research.
And knowing the prices is almost the hardest thing now, because all these price guides that came out, when they were at the height of, the peak of their prices, they're not selling for those prices anymore. So how do you even know what to offer? Oh yeah, some stuff is, but some stuff is not. And a lot of the old timers want those high prices that are now 3 or 4 years old. And it's like, dude, you're not going to get that. But they also have no incentive to get rid of it otherwise. Like, right. I'll hang on to this for 50 years. I don't care. Yep.
It's like, well, you're going to have to pay to pry it out of their cold, dead hands then.
Hopefully before they're cold and dead.
Well, hopefully it gets trickier when they're gone. But anyways, public development. Have you noticed a shift with that over the years?
Well, yeah, it seemed like when the advent of the forums in regards to what we do with the homebrew community, when people were first starting to get into things, it seemed like every game sort of had its own thread, and every thread was sort of getting a lot of attention, and the developers were reaching out to the community for ideas, like, what do you want to see? What do you not want to see? And it seemed like a lot of games were sort of shaped this way.
Battle Kit is the prime example of that. Hundreds of threads, tons of community involvement, constant excitement. Like, every new development was a huge deal and everybody was excited.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened after that? That type of thing, I should say.
Well, and I don't necessarily know the reasoning, but it seemed like a lot of developers became more reclusive with their ideas and their sort of development. They were working on things behind the scenes. A lot of times you didn't even know it until the game was out, and you were like, oh, you were working on that? I had no idea.
Yeah, that's kind of how a lot of us do things. I think a lot of that shift has been in regards to who's in the community.
Yeah.
People like myself, we are reclusive and don't don't really want to talk about stuff till it's done.
Mm-hmm.
We also saw a lot of people who had shown up over the years and talked about things and gotten really, a lot of hype behind it and then disappeared and never finished things.
Yeah, like when UDC decided he was going to port the Oregon Trail and he did the title screen and then disappeared.
Yeah, I mean, stuff like that. Like, you didn't want to be that guy, so you kept it to yourself and you put your head down and worked, and eventually maybe you have something to show.
Yeah, and I can sort of see both sides of it. Like, when you are the reclusive developer, there's almost less pressure because no one is expecting, you announced this, when is it coming out? Like, why aren't you done yet?
That question of, when is it coming out? You just posted this, when's it coming out?
It just starts to weigh on your shoulders, like, God, like, you just don't have the freedom to take your time and, like, focus on it because you're just so overwhelmed with people's demands. But at the same time, like, when people see that you're working on something, they have the time to sort of get excited and hyped on it, and they're going to buy it the second it comes out. So there's good and bad. And I think that these days it seems with the sort of the interest in what we're doing as the homebrew community, like, the interest, I think, is sort of off the charts right now. So I think it is almost better these days to sort of tease what you're doing as you're doing it, so people have something to look forward to, because it seems like, when you post animated GIFs on Twitter or whatever, they sort of circulate around and people start finding you.
Yeah, as much as I want to, it's still like cringeworthy for me if I post anything. It's like, oh, this isn't going to be done tomorrow. Bunny Boy's famous comment of, however much time you think it'll take, times it by 10.
Yep.
Yeah.
But he's very adamant about not giving release dates.
Oh, yes, that. Which I will agree is a very good idea.
Yep.
No holiday games.
Well, what else we got?
Well, there's always been the question in the homebrew community about limiting releases.
Oh, okay.
A lot of people look at it as it's part of that collectability thing of artificially restricting the number of copies that are released in order to jack prices up or make your sales or do whatever. How has that shifted over the years, do you think? Or give me some examples of the beginning.
I feel that my answers might be biased since...
Really?
Well, yeah, you know what I'm saying. When people, like, let's just start at the beginning with Garage Cart.
Okay.
Memblers decided to release it. He was using donors, so obviously his resources were sort of limited in, the cartridges he wanted to use as donors and the amount of time and effort he wanted to put into sort of making this release. So how many did he do on his run? Like 30 something?
No, it was like 24.
Okay, 24 Garage Carts were released. They went into the wild. Then sort of fast forward, Al Bailey's doing Sudoku. He releases a gold version of Sudoku, a silver version of Sudoku, and then like a general release. So this sort of...
And then release version 2 and release version 3.
Yeah, I don't want to say like a precedent was set, but like they sort of did things in a way that developers said, okay, well, there must be some sort of demand for like a limited version. And
yeah,
I don't
Civac had limited stuff right off the bat.
Yeah, he always did, I think, 33 of everything, his Battle Kit releases. And then when I did, my Frogger game, I did 10 Pink Lady versions. Like, we wanted to create something fun and sort of, I don't want to say collectible, but just something special for the people that helped beta test it or helped, source parts for it. Just something to say thank you. Here's something like a special version of my game just for you. And I think prices just sort of started inflating to a point where like developers that were coming into it were like, oh, like I can release a limited version of my game and get prices like this. That's pretty awesome. So I think the reasoning for creating limited versions of games maybe changed from doing something special for people who were helping out to, oh, I can make astronomical amounts of money. So once that started sort of being the case, that was not sustainable at all, because as we said in the past, like the prices just got too high for anyone to sort of get into it. So luckily that's died down a little bit. And I think that consumers as a whole, like the people buying this stuff, have backed way off too, because they see that, if they're buying it for resale purpose, like you're not going to get your money back at those prices anyway.
Well, when you did Pink Lady Frogger, you weren't limiting it for tens of thousands of people who might possibly bid on it. You made it for Nintendo Age,
Mm-hmm.
which at that time was maybe a few thousand members and maybe 50 to 100 that were actually interested in homebrew things.
Yeah.
That you made it for a specific community, and we don't see that now. Now we look at it and go, "Wow, $1,000 for that game? That's insane!" Like, but how do I get it?
Yeah, good luck.
That's very. Yeah, I've been trying for years.
I know. Poor Beau.
It's the last K-Hand game I need. Con games, I like to call them.
One day.
But, like, you weren't making them to sell them. You were making them for real people who you knew. You know, Ross won one from just having the best score, and James got one from helping you with your Sprite Zero hits and whatnot. Brian's got one for the same reason. Like, they went to real people involved with the project. And even before that, things like Garage Cart, Joe never intended to limit that. He just kind of, got busy with other things, and it wasn't a priority, and before he knew it, a few years had gone by, and it was like, oh, I probably shouldn't make anymore. Like, that's its own thing now. Like, you don't realize how fast time goes for people that are buying these things when you intend to do one thing, and time just flies.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen the laminate in his basement that he bought this entire roll of laminate, UV coated to do the labels in, and there's still 98% of it sitting there, waiting to be used. He's got stacks of hundreds of donors. Like, on the other hand, he can't really justifiably do more of the exact same thing without, probably, bothering some people that paid $1,800 for it.
Yeah, I mean, once they became collectible, just because of the scarcity of them and sort of the legendary status of the cartridges themselves, like, yeah, if I were spending that kind of money on something that was that special and then he turned around and started making them again without any changes, yeah, I'd probably be upset about it too.
Yeah, you certainly wouldn't be too happy. There's one fellow who's done that over the years, and he doesn't redo his limited stuff, but he redoes any of his regular releases. You can still buy for like $20, and it's like, this is awesome. I can still pay reasonable, actually dirt cheap prices that involve no cost for labor or programming, and have it on my shelf, and it's pretty much the same thing unless you've taken notes and know exactly when and where it came from, like I do.
Is that an NES release?
Yeah, Robot Urchin with Dragon Leap and Dragon Feet and T-Gun and all that. Although he won't do Dragon Feet again because he doesn't care for the game, which I completely understand. You hit a certain point in your life and you're like, nope, nobody should ever see this.
I know how he feels.
Yeah, but yes, sneak and peek. But you can still get Dragon Leap for like $20 if you just ask him online. He does runs periodically, which for the people that were buying it to collect it and flip it and sell it, it's like, oh, you got burned, fool. Mm-hmm. And for those of us that just want to play, we're like, thank you. But yeah, that whole, people always harp, not always. Some people have really harped on the whole idea of like limiting releases and just, they're super negative on it. But if you're going to make something and like really take the time to do it right, it's so much easier to just do a set amount than an endless forever run that somebody may call you up someday and you have to say, yeah, I'll dig everything out of the closet and make you one more. Yeah,
I mean, plus there's a big investment for runs of games. Like, if you buy 300 pieces to make 300 copies, and you sell out, and the market's not really there anymore, but there's 10 more people that want to buy it after you're sold out. Do you go out and buy 300 more pieces for 300 more copies? No, like, it's just not cost effective. So you're not going to please everyone, but you have to make financial decisions that are best for your situation.
Let me tell you how many copies or boxes of Swords and Runes I have. We could start a small bonfire. No,
you don't have a guest room. Let's put it that way.
No, it's gone down over the years. I'm still shocked people buy that after all these years, but it's time and come and gone. But yeah, you end up with a ton of stuff that you have to store, you have to keep track of, and then you have to build whenever anybody wants one. Like, it's a hassle.
Yeah, and you can't send those boxes back to the manufacturer and say, "Oh, I don't need these, refund me." Like, your money's spent. Like, you're stuck with them. If they don't sell, you're just losing, you're out that money.
Yeah, and the only way you get them at a decent price is large quantities, so you kind of hedge your bets on how many might I sell, maybe someday.
That's the eternal struggle.
Yeah. And if you're using donors, it's multiplied by like 20 as prices have gone up for even the cheap, crappy games that you would normally use. Like if you're having to pay $4 to $10 for a donor, you're not going to be making any more copies.
No.
You sell your 50, you move on, and that's it. You don't care anymore. You've got your game out. Done. Awesome. You've accomplished your dreams. So what about that eternal question of what is a homebrew? How has that shifted over the years?
Well, I mean, I think that there are new tools now to like create homebrews to maybe make things more accessible for other people, but I don't know that I would change what a homebrew, what I've thought a homebrew has been all these years.
Oh man, that's changed so much over the years.
Well, school me, Beau.
Over the years, we've had to redefine what a homebrew is in light of what a homebrew is not. So when elaborate hacks like Pyronaut came out, we had to say, well, even though it's been 95% recoded, it's still not a homebrew because it's borrowing base code from something else. Or when, a translation comes out like, oh, look, it's the same thing. And you're like, no, it's not. Here's why it's different. Or when Kevin Hanley ports, 50 games to the NES from other consoles, like, is that a homebrew? And you have to go, well, yeah, it kind of is. Or no, it's kind of not. Like, you have to make those decisions. And it's been an evolving definition, but it's really one that maybe we want to address on a future episode.
Yeah, I think that's probably best.
Yeah, there's been some key changes in the past year that I think will warrant a further discussion that, we've gone long enough on our recurring topics in the community discussion so far.
So do we want to talk about a game now?
Oh, we don't talk about games on here. We just talk about our wild theories, don't we?
Well, every once in a while we try to sneak a game in, and what game are we sneaking in today?
Well, it's been asked for. This was actually the winner of our patron voting conversation about what game would you like to see featured next, which at the time it was tied between this and Lizard, and I broke the tie to say Lizard because I really had wanted to play it, and I'd already played this game. But we are going to talk about The Legends of Owlia.
Yes.
By Gradual Games.
Yes. So it's been a long time coming, I think. We've wanted to get Derek back on here to actually get into the meat of one of his creations.
Yeah, we featured his music, I think, twice. We interviewed him at GGVM, and it's time to actually look at one of his games. And he's done Nomalos, Storming the Castle, Legends of Owlia was a second game, and he's currently working on a game called Trophy, with no lengthy subtitle for whatever reason.
Maybe he needs to come on and talk about how he has reevaluated how he does his game titles.
Give us about 20 to 30 minutes, and we'll get to that.
Okay.
So if you get 2 sentences, Kevin Hanley, to describe the type of game The Legends of Owlia is.
So I'd say the gameplay is sort of a 3/4 perspective, action-adventure, fantasy-based with owls and real-time combat with a cool narrative. Tell me about the narrative, Beau.
Once upon a time, in a world far beyond imagination, 6 great owls brought forth a land called Owlia. Together they reigned in peace, wisdom, and prosperity for 80,000 years. However, their pride in the beautiful lands and skies of Owlia led them to neglect the vast, immeasurable seas. And from there we have a story about Merman, king of the mermen! Merman! Damn it.
You're very passionate about the fact that he is a man.
Well, that's a Zoolander reference, but
Oh, okay.
Merman oft rose to the surface to survey the land of Owlia. His desire for sunlight, green forest, and most of all the power of flight, because who wouldn't want that, grew until he knew the oceans were not enough for him. He endeavored to capture the 6 great horned owls one by one in order to sap their power of flight. Merman, not man, then empowered his minions to float towards the lands of Owlia to claim it for his own. And thus begins the quest of, I'm going to butcher this name like no tomorrow. Adlaniel? Adlanel? And it's like flannel, but like, I think it's like Danielle, but like Adlaniel.
You're trying to say the main character's name?
Yeah, just help me here.
Adlaniel. I think
like
you're right on.
Atlanteal?
Adlaniel.
Atlanteal. Atlanteal is the heroine. Nope, that's a drug. Nope, she's still the heroine. That's actually how you say it. And she is accompanied on her quest by Tito, or Taito, but I'm going to say Tito, her owl companion.
Also, my favorite Jackson from the Jackson 5.
I knew that was his name. Elise and I were talking about that earlier. Dang. I still don't understand how Little Michael was such a big deal. But heard ABC 1, 2, 3 in the grocery store. I'm like, adults listen to this? Get real. But yeah, Tito, your owl, your buddy. And what do you do with your owl, Kevin?
So many things, Beau. That sounded a little dirtier than I probably wanted it to. But so when
he does have a pecker.
When you start the game, you can use him to attack creatures for you, or you can use him to fetch items for you. This
small owl that you love, you whip at various enemies as if he was a baseball.
So it's probably your best bet as far as like ranged combat, because with your sword is very, very short, so you kind of have to get right on the enemies to use it, and that usually winds up with you getting hit. So using the owl for sort of ranged combat is very nice, and then a lot of times you have to use your owl to retrieve items that sort of spawn, or like after you kill an enemy that's kind of out of reach, you have to use the fetch to sort of retrieve the item.
Yeah, so the owl mechanic is kind of the central mechanic to this game. It's like Zelda, but you have this pet owl that will do things.
Yep.
He will hurtle at enemies. He will fetch, like Kevin said. You can also do things like drop bombs, lanterns. He will carry the heroine places. He will... What else will Tito do?
He can turn into a shield and surround the heroine to kill all the enemies that come around you. And then the final sort of most powerful thing you can do with it is it's like a homing device. Yes, it'll kill whatever enemy is closest to you.
Yeah, so it's like Zelda, but it differs in a key aspect because it's level based.
Mm-hmm.
You start in the town, you walk around, you talk to people, then you leave the town, you go find some sort of great owl who tells you various things about, he gives you your quest, and then you got to go find the first dungeon. So the game alternates between overworld and dungeon each time. There's NPCs scattered throughout the overworlds, but then dungeons are, dungeons. Dungeons are also single screen, like Zelda 1, and the overworlds are like full-on 8-way scrolling, which is fairly impressive, I will say.
Yeah, it is. And it takes a little bit of, exploring. Each dungeon, you actually have to accumulate a certain amount of gold in order to sort of unlock it. So you have to...
In the overworld, right?
Yes, in the overworld. So you have to do a lot of exploring in the overworld to collect gold from chests and also from killing enemies in order to unlock the dungeon before you can go into it and try to save whichever great owl is being trapped therein.
Yeah, so there's these great owls, you got to save them all, and that's why you're going through these dungeons. When you finish the dungeon, that great owl will take you to the new place, and that's why you can't retraverse the old world.
Right.
It does not have a connected overworld.
Yeah, there's no backtracking or anything like that. Nope. It's always collect the gold to unlock whatever dungeon you're at to save whatever owl is trapped in it.
So what items will the player come across in her quest to defeat Merman?
So, like I mentioned, you come across gold, you come across bombs, and you come across hearts. And this game is unique, at least I haven't seen any game like this, to where you have, like Zelda, 3 hearts that you start out with, but you can collect more hearts to keep in your inventory if your health is full, to where if you get hit a couple times and you're down to 1 heart, you can open your inventory screen and actually use the hearts that you have in your inventory to replenish your life.
Which is crazy. I mean, like, you're sitting there at some boss, and you're like, I'm down to 1 heart. You hit pause to take a refresher, and you're like, what do I do now? I have no clue. And you're like, why does it say health on this screen? Why does it say 7 next to it? And you go to click it, and you're like, oh man, I can replenish my hearts.
Yes,
I'll take it.
That is a very sort of nice feature that he put in there. It makes the game a lot more. Makes it easier.
Makes it playable. Yeah. Like this was one of the, I think this was the last game I said I was going to test until Micromages came along. But even as having played it in the testing phase, and I've played through it many a time, I was still sitting there this last time. I was like, what do I do? And I was like, why does it say health? And sure enough, it was like, oh, there's the light bulb moment. Yeah, you're not used to seeing that. Like in Zelda, they always had, you capture the fairy, you put it in a bottle, and you die, and it automatically refills. This involves some strategy on your part and some thinking ahead and knowing what the game actually entails to use wisely.
It's almost along the same lines as the potions in the original Zelda, to where you physically have to pause the game, use the potion, and then return to action.
Very true.
But the fact that you can collect 7 of each item, you can have 7 bombs, 7 hearts going in there.
Lanterns.
I only remember using lanterns in a single area, so I'd never really had to keep track of them because I never ever ran out.
Well, it's another item, is what I was getting at.
Okay, I honestly did not know that you can only have 7 lanterns.
Oh, you can only have 7 of anything.
Yeah.
Which, as a programmer, is always like, there were some very conscious RAM decisions being made, and I can appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. So, enemies. Tell me about the enemies in this game.
They are...
What'd you like? What'd you see? What'd you dislike?
Well, I mean, what immediately comes to mind is how few of them there are. Like, there's usually 2 enemies per screen, occasionally 3 or 4, but very, very rarely. And none of them sort of have any elaborate movement. They are all pretty, I don't want to say boring, because they're not boring. It's just nothing jumped out at me as being like overly elaborate, as far as
I mean, they come towards you, they might throw something at you. You've probably seen them before in some other game somewhere, though you may not be able to place exactly where. They were all well done.
I really like the design of them. The design,
yes.
Like the octopus, the crab, the anglerfish.
Oh, you're talking bosses.
No, those aren't bosses.
Oh, okay. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. The anglerfish.
Yeah, I really like the anglerfish because he uses that enemy type for a couple early puzzles, to where they illuminate an area in front of them.
That's an anglerfish.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry,
I know what you're talking about now.
I'm reading the manual where it actually gives these enemies names.
Just the fish with the light. That's what I call it.
But no, the design of these enemies is very, very nice. Lori did an amazing job with the art. We haven't even mentioned her yet, right?
Yeah, sadly. Gradual Games is not just Derek, who does the programming and design and music, but the other half of Gradual Games is Lori, who does the art. That's his wife. Mm-hmm. And together they've just made this amazing team over the years, as each of their games shows progression for both of them in terms of what they're doing, and it's been wonderful to see.
Yeah, so looking through the list of all the enemies, it seems like all of them are sort of water-based, crabs, pufferfish, eel, jellyfish, that kind of thing. But
because our evil villain's a merman?
That could be. That's a very astute observation there, Beau.
Well,
but they're
8 years in college.
They're all very colorful, and they all have very distinct shapes. They're very easily identifiable. So they did a very good job with the enemies.
One thing that I noticed about Owlia, and I noticed it even more so after having played his new game, Trophy, is Derek took a ton of time with the boss fights. Like, they're elaborate, they're complicated, and they are interesting as can be. Oh,
absolutely. Right from the start, I think the first boss is sort of an elaborate octopus.
Yes, the octopus who bobs back and forth on the screen and then throws his spear-like tentacle at you, and you have to dodge but also hit him.
My favorite boss in this game is the crab boss. And I don't I don't want to give away why that is, but if you haven't played this game yet, please pick it up and at least get to the 3rd dungeon so you could fight the crab boss and figure out what to do, because it's such a cool idea. I really, really like it.
That is probably the best boss in the game, I think. I would agree with you on that.
Yeah, the final boss is very memorable, but yeah, that crab boss is probably the one that I'm going to remember the longest in my brain.
No, that's the type of thing that you look at and go, maybe I could just borrow this idea too? You know? Maybe nobody will notice.
Yeah, that was...
Too bad it's not a licensed game where you can do that freely. Tell me about the puzzles in the game.
So the puzzles in the game, they are...
What do they consist of?
A lot of pillars that you have to move in a specific sequential order, and every time you sort of reveal a puzzle and solve a puzzle in a dungeon, typically you're rewarded with a key, and you have to get 2 or 3 or sometimes 4 keys in a dungeon to unlock sort of the final boss room. So you're always on the hunt for these keys. So you have the pillars. There are like owl statues that you have to change colors of to sort of reveal a specific color pattern. What else?
There is a switch puzzle where you have to step on switches in a certain order, and then also one puzzle that uses some bombs and exploding things.
Yes.
At the same time, which we'll get to in a bit.
Yes.
So the game also features very large worlds. Like in terms of homebrews, like the scrolling overworlds, although you can't retraverse them and there's no towns or whatnot, there's limited NPCs, they're still very large. You don't normally see things that big.
Do you think that is primarily because the main heroine herself is sort of extra large, not in weight, but in like the size of the sprite itself? Like she's a large sprite. So you almost have to compound the world to make it that large.
That is one of the things about this game, is that they used very large sprites. She is, 16 by 32?
That'd be my guess.
Final Fantasy characters are 16 by 24, and like Zelda or Link is 16 by 16.
Mm-hmm.
So picture 2 Links stacked on top of each other. Like that's pretty large in terms of like the dungeons and stuff are still 16 by 16.
Yeah.
So when you're walking, you end up getting hit by things that you probably shouldn't or wouldn't think you would.
Mm-hmm.
You learn pretty quick, but yeah, the world is reflective of the houses are huge. The other NPCs are huge. Most of the enemies are larger. If Link saw that size of octopus coming at him, like, no, he'd be done. He's like, Zelda can help herself.
The hero of death.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that bothered me with, and maybe this isn't in direct relation to the art size, but the trees are all very, very tall. And I constantly want to walk behind the top of them. But the way he did the collision, you can't do that. Like, you can't walk through any part of the tree, even if it looks like it should be from that angle behind the tree itself.
Yeah, the NES, because it didn't have layers, as you intimately know, I think that's why that is. Mm-hmm. Like, there's just unless you're really going to build the whole game around the fact that you can pass behind objects, I think that's why the decision was made. No, you're not nitpicking, because if you go to play Crystalis and you do walk behind the objects and you see half of your character over the object before it flips to go behind it, like, you're like, that looks like crap. So I completely understand why he didn't try to do some sort of layering.
Yeah, that opens up a lot of... Yeah,
unless you're really going to build for it, it is just a bother.
Are there any sort of qualms that you had with the game?
The Legends of Owlia, the biggest thing that it suffers from is what I like to call the comparison game. Mm-hmm. Where you're like, oh, this game's a lot like Zelda, and here's how it's not.
Yep.
Or it's, in this case, a lot like Star Tropics, but here's how it's definitely not.
Yeah, it's sort of a slippery slope, because are you complaining because the game is not what you wanted it to be, or are you complaining because of what the game is? Like, it's so hard to talk poorly of the game because it's not what he wanted to make. Like, if he didn't want to make the game a certain way, like, who are you to complain about it, Well,
the biggest issue with that is if he did want it to be a certain way, if I want to make a game that's just like Legacy of the Wizard, and then I ignore most of what the Legacy of the Wizard is about, then, I've kind of failed in that. But to just take different parts and be inspired by things and try to make your own game, then you really can't play the comparison game. But you constantly want to, because it's so close to so many things.
Yeah, and I do love this game a lot. The biggest problem I have with it is the only real exploration I feel like I did in the game is at the very beginning, where you have to find that first tree to initiate the first cutscene with the owl. From then on, you're just looking around for gold to unlock the next dungeon, and then when you beat that dungeon, the owl carries you to the next world. Like, there's no real exploration of the overworld itself.
Well, you don't see a lot of games set in the three-quarters perspective with a lot of weapons and puzzles and stuff that are level-based. I can think of Grandmaster for the Famicom was one, and Daikatana for the Game Boy Color, and that's kind of it. Like, usually you have an overworld that you retraverse, so you're expecting something else than what you get. And yeah, the exploration is down because of that. Your biggest sort of requirement is to find gold in a new area, which is also kind of a complaint about the game. And I remember the first time I played the game as a tester, I never realized that there were gold requirements for the dungeons because they were much lower back then. And then at some point, I think a few of us brought that up, and so the requirement was raised. And this last time I played through it, I was like, man, that is too high. Like, I don't want to have to keep finding gold all the time.
Is there like a story-driven reason why you have to find gold to unlock the dungeon? It just doesn't make sense to me in my brain.
Yeah, it's not something you've seen before. If a game, well, we know certain conventions, we expect to gain experience, or we expect this type of puzzle or whatnot. Which most of the puzzles were very intuitive. The gold requirement to enter a dungeon was kind of like, huh?
Yeah.
But, okay. The only thing I can recommend is if you haven't played the game and you really want to, on level 2, the Ice World, the top right screen, or I think when you start, if you just go straight up, just farm a bunch of gold, and then you never have to worry about it again. You not once will have to go find gold if you just keep killing things and picking up stuff. And yeah, it's just a little unbalanced would be my only thing. Because like normally, like with RPGs, with experience, if I fought every enemy in a dungeon, I should be able to just move to the next dungeon without any issues. Yeah. Like I should only really get in trouble if I'm running and not fighting things. But that's really it.
Yeah, they're minor things.
There's one other thing.
Uh-oh.
The bomb puzzle.
Ah, the bomb puzzle.
You know the bomb puzzle.
I do.
Yes. So one of the biggest strengths of the Legends of Owlia is that the puzzles are intuitive. You look at it and go, you can either figure out what it wants, or you can look at it and go, I've seen this somewhere else before. I definitely know what it wants. And you will find one room in World 2, the dungeon, where there's 2 items. You just learned how to use bombs, and there's 2 things on the screen that you can explode. And you explode one, nothing happens. You explode the other, nothing happens. So you go back into the room.
But it gives you like a weird sound effect that you never hear anywhere else. Like
yes.
Basically saying you did something incorrect, I guess.
I guess I had the volume too low.
Oh, okay.
But, and so you're sitting there looking at it, and you're like, well, I know I need to explode them both at the same time. That's got to be the only way. And I probably spent 2 hours wandering the rest of the dungeon trying to find, bombing every wall and doing whatever else, and finally came back to this and was like, how in the world do you do this? And I got some help, and he added in some NPC text, but you have to explode them both at the same time, and you have to do that by how, Kevin?
You have to throw the owl into the wall and then run the opposite direction, and then the owl turns around and chases you down and will then place the bomb where you're standing when he reaches you.
Something like that. I somehow did it completely different today, but okay.
Well, that's how I did it, and that's, I think, how the manual sort of alludes to it. But I agree, when you put a mechanic in a game that you use in a single place for something required to get through the dungeon, like it just seemed really obtuse and didn't really make a lot of sense, because I didn't even find anyone in the game that said anything about that. I happened to track down some sort of reference to it in the manual.
Oh, there's a wandering NPC in the ice world, but yeah, even still, it's like, yeah, it should either be a mechanic that's reused more or dropped altogether.
Mhm.
But I think at that point it was already in there, and you gotta have something to get that last key. But you cannot progress without it, and it is like if you don't use save states, if you're not playing the ROM, which is freely available online, you'll constantly have to be going to find more bombs and
Yeah.
doing all sorts of
I
various
did
things.
like that when you pick up a bomb, it gives you 3, I think, each time you pick
does
one.
it?
Yeah, it seems like the bombs replenish very, very quickly. But what's such a shame is like that mechanic, when you finally figure out how to do it, it's so cool. Like I wish it would have been reused more.
Yeah, I kind of wonder how else it could have been used throughout the game.
Yeah, I mean, even if he used it in the same way again at a different location, like he did reuse puzzle types, so I don't know why he didn't.
Yeah, and because the game is level based, like each level gives you a new ability, and so that level tends to kind of harp on that ability, which Zelda did too with the dungeons. But you don't often reuse those same things in other places. I don't think you ever use lanterns in the actual game, do you? Other than those,
there's a couple
sort of optional caves.
Yeah, in the mountain. Yeah, those are the
but
only
you don't
place.
have to go in them.
There was one other thing that, and it's minor, that bothered me. When you die and get a game over and continue, it resets what abilities are mapped to your buttons. So you constantly have to go back and reset your abilities. And if you keep dying at a certain spot over and over, it just becomes a pain in the butt to like go in, reset your abilities, get back to that room. It just became a nuisance to me.
Ah, you're a grumpy old man.
Absolutely.
No, I played with save states, so I just reloaded whenever I died.
Yeah, jerk.
Yeah, I'm terrible. So yeah, like we said, Lori did a wonderful job with the art. The world is expressive. It's highly animated. There's a wide variety of graphical types, and you could really see her skill grow beyond what she did in Nomalos. Like, it's just... I mean, 3/4 perspective is kind of hard to begin with, but she really just kind of nailed it, I think.
Yeah, and there's some really good sort of cutscene graphics when you finish the game. Some highlights of some battles that you went through. So yeah, that art is fantastic. Like overall, the game looks very good. And the characters themselves, like some of the NPCs, like some of the pirates that you come across, like they have some pretty distinct personalities.
Oh, and with the pirates in the sort of pirate world, you encounter some mini games. So the game also has some, games within a game to kind of grind out some gold and things like that if you don't have enough for the end boss.
Yeah.
But fun little carnival type things. I thought that was a nice little touch.
It was a welcome change for sure.
Tell me about the music master Kevin.
Overall, I think the music in the game is very good. There are sort of scenes that have just sort of a melody and bass with no sort of percussion going on, but then you have more sort of Renaissance type Baroque music or whatever. But I didn't feel that there was a lot of variety. It seemed like he reused a lot of the music in the dungeons.
Oh, I don't know. I guess for me, the usual test, because I don't have the musical skills ye all do, I never got tired of anything. I could always keep listening to it. If I had it paused and sitting next to me while I, typed some notes or whatever, it didn't grate on me.
Yeah.
And that's awesome to me. Like I can't stand a game that has bad music, so this had pretty good solid sounds.
No, I will agree with that. I guess the game itself just felt sort of epic to me, so I guess wanted more. But I can't complain.
Zelda only had one song, right?
Well, has
one for the dungeon, one for the overworld,
and then one for the last
title
boss
screen. Yeah, and that was like it. So
well, I mean,
that's a good template.
Yeah, okay. I'll give that to you.
All right. Well,
it just seemed like Derek being a musician. I figured he would have. Maybe he just didn't have the space. But I figured.
Yeah, but you can see him grow. If you look at Nomalos, that's all like recomposing.
Yes.
Composing of Baroque songs. This is actually original music.
Yes.
And someday soon we will see that Trophy is on steroids. Awesome. Well, we've already seen it. We've played a couple of his songs on the podcast. His musical skills in terms of NES composing have just gone off the charts.
I haven't played Trophy yet, so I do look forward to experiencing what music's in there, because you've definitely hyped it up.
Well, he is one developer, and Lori is an artist. She's one artist who you can clearly see that they're not striving. I mean, they are striving for perfection with each thing they do, but that level, that the standard and the bar gets raised with each game, and they just do something that is so much better. And I don't even know if they're aware of the leaps and bounds that they're going through with each incarnation of their work. I mean, the music and art and gameplay, everything, it's just so evolutionary. You don't normally see that. People hide their unfinished projects and they come out with these great things or whatever, but these guys just lay it all on the table, and they do the best they can, and they just move on and learn from it, and that's wonderful to see.
It seems like they have a very high success rate of coming up with an idea and tackling it and actually doing it very well. You don't hear about them having a lot of unfinished projects.
I can tell you they don't, as I've done the interviews, but for the book and whatnot. But if you look at each of their games in the context of when it was released in the life of the community, when Nomelos was released, full scrolling platformer awesomeness, nobody else had done it.
Right.
Owlia, 3/4 perspective, Zelda-like, with, a bunch of levels and whatnot. Nobody else had done it. So it's kind of hard when we go back and evaluate, stuff that was huge 4 or 5 years ago in light of what's coming out now. But I really think Owlia stands the test of time.
Yeah. The graphics, the animation, the music, it still feels fresh playing it today. Because I beat it when it first came out, but playing through it again, there were a lot of things that I did not remember. So it was nice being able to experience it all again.
You got a favorite level or location?
I mean, it's hard to not say. Well, I think when you take the submarine to the final boss area, what transpires during that journey, I feel is very, very unique and exciting. So that was nice to witness.
I love underwater sections, so I completely agree.
Did a hell of a job with the graphics there too. I like the bubbles sort of floating by.
Oh, the bubbles are great. I liked the ice world myself. I'm generally partial to ice worlds. Something about them, and the music in that one I remember was very good. Other than that one puzzle in the dungeon, I love the ice world.
Which puzzle?
The bomb one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that one.
Did you have a favorite boss, or do you agree that it's the crab?
The crab is so genius. That one is great just because you use a mechanic that is so underutilized for combat. And that's all I'm going to say. That one's good. I kind of like the first boss a lot as well, just because you're like, wow, man, okay, we're really going to play a full epic now.
Yeah, that really sort of sets the tone for, oh, okay, so this is the level this is going to be at. It really sort of sets the stage.
Yeah, probably the hardest one was the eel or the kraken on the submarine. That one, because you're already kind of down in your hearts. And you're like, man, I just gotta make it through this. And again, I cheated with save states, but hey, whatever.
There's a trick to that boss to where you can do it without getting touched, really.
Oh yeah, you just gotta be very patient, like many games. Anyways, that was one of the things in Lizard too, with the bosses, it was all about patience and not, blowing your load. Yeah, you can probably take that out.
Definitely not. So, would you say the game is fun? What's the fun factor? What's the replayability? Where would you rate those things?
I find it to be rather fun. It's like Zelda. You got to get over those preconceptions. I always want to say, well, it's kind of like Zelda, but really it's kind of like Owlia. And if you're willing to play a game that, progresses linearly, then it's a solid entry. That's not normally the type of game I like. I don't like platformers. I don't like level-based things. I like to be able to take my dear sweet time and just get through things eventually. But yeah, no, it was good. The only that just gets in the way when it comes to replayability, because there's nowhere else that you haven't been. So I've sat on it now for 3 years before replaying it, and still a solid game. Yes. It'll probably be a few years before I replay it again, though. Yeah,
it's very fun. It's replayable, like you said, once every few years. I think that playing through the game, if there weren't anything to like stop you dead in your tracks, like that gold grind that if you're not prepared for it can sneak up and prevent you from progressing. If the game just played through straight, I think that it would be absolutely fantastic. But if you don't have the gold and you have to backtrack through the overworld and, you're just like, okay, you go to talk to try to get in the dungeon. It doesn't let you, okay, it respawns all the enemies. Let me just go kill them and try to get more chests and try to get more gold. If you are far below the threshold you need to progress, It does take a little bit of time.
Well restart the game.
Yeah, it's tough, man. But like, other than that small sort of annoyance, like I feel that the game is very, very fun, and it's something you can beat in one sitting. Like, it doesn't take that long.
Yeah, it's definitely not overly long, but it still gives
a couple hours maybe.
Still gives you a lot of action for your money, and it's always hard with games that are pretty much bug free with solid mechanics, because you really can't complain about any of the normal stuff that you complain about. Like, the game is functional and it works and it plays well. So then you just end up focusing on design things, which a lot of games don't get to that point because they're broken inherently from, programming issues.
Right. When did this game originally come out?
So Owlia came out in roughly April of 2016, and it had been announced a couple years prior. I think they'd worked on it for about a year and a half before they ever told anybody that they were actually working on it. And then he was like, I still remember the day when he announced that it was coming out. It was a snow day, so I was teaching at the time, and substitute teaching, not real teaching. And we had the day off, so we walked to the grocery store, got some coffee, and I checked my phone. I'm like, what is this madness that Derek is posting? Like, this is so exciting. And like, I was shocked. I was like, man, like, this is it. We are doing the best that has been done in the community ever.
Yes, it's ushering in a new era
of homebrew
greatness.
And they were done, because they don't tell people that they're working on things for like 2 years. It was done like a year or two later, and it was like, it's already out, man. They usually take forever. But it came out, and it was released as a limited edition, which came with a yellow shell, cardboard box, styrofoam, sleeve, manual, 24-page color manual. Don't skip on the manual at all. And,
is it a different kind of box than the regular edition?
Well, we'll get to that.
Graphically?
We'll get to that in a sec. And
okay, sorry.
It came with a little owl, and Derek hand numbered them all. They were 1 to 50. And he's normally not like a big LE person, limited edition person, but Lori's mom had throat cancer and had gone through all the medical processes and had some bills. So they auctioned off the 50 copies as a way to raise money to pay her medical bills, which was awesome. You look at the limited editions that, Kevin or I have done, you're like, oh, that's a filthy cash grab. And you're like, well, not really, but we'll get into that. And this one, it was like, this is actually going to help somebody. And so people came out and they bid anywhere from like $92, I think was the lowest, up all the way up to $550. And I think it really made a difference in some people's lives because of that.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, stories like that, it makes you think, like, what we're doing here, there's a bigger picture going on.
Yeah, and he normally just, sells first come, first serve basis, but it was a nice thing to see happen. And so those 50 copies went off, and then it was offered for sale on Infinite NES Lives. And because you have to order, not have to, but generally if you want a decent deal, you have to order boxes in quantity. The leftover cardboard boxes went out with the first run of the CIBs. And so I think he said for the first year, anybody that ordered one ended up with a cardboard box, and then they sold out. And they went to bit boxes after that, which is what you can currently buy. It's for sale on Infinite NES Lives from Paul for, I think, $35 for a cart only. Well, a cart manual, or like $47 for a cart manual and a bit box with artwork and all that. And how else, Kevin? How else can if somebody wanted to play this game today, how could they go do that immediately?
Can't they just go to gradualgames.com and download it?
Yeah, so Derek, he built his wonderful Gradual Games virtual machine where you could play it on PC using Java, and then he just released the ROM after that. So if you don't want to go through the complicated process of Java, you can just go download the ROM from his website. It's free, and I think it's got some tweaks and improvements over the cart version, or maybe that's just with Nomelos and the retro USB initial version. But yeah, you can go play it today if you like it. Send him a few bucks or go buy a cart copy, and if not, then whatever.
So should we talk to Derek? Should we bring him on?
Yeah, because Owlia actually has a very deep and complex story stretching all the way back to when Derek was like 10. So yeah, let's bring him on for sure.
Hey, Derek, how are you?
Hey, Beau. I'm doing good. How are you?
Oh, just wonderful. So you have a very distinct name for your company, Gradual Games. Tell me about that.
That's a great question. I think when I was a teenager and was first learning game development and programming, I at the time was really interested in learning how to become more motivated because I had a lot of difficulties, staying on task with the games I was working on back then. And one tidbit my dad shared with me was a quote by a scientist named Pavlov, who said to his students to school themselves to severe gradualness. And that stuck with me for a long time. And I thought to myself, if I were to name myself somewhat after that quote, it would set up a self-fulfilling prophecy whereby I would move slowly, and I would just affirm the fact that I was moving slowly and not feel bad about it. Because I think when I was a teenager, interacting with some programmers in the QBasic RPG scene approximately 20 years ago, they made me feel as though I had to have an enormous number of things done and quickly, and I think it sort of discouraged me. And so I decided to call myself the opposite of that, so that I would affirm and feel happy about moving really slowly. And so that's why I called myself Gradual Games.
Did you say severe gradualness?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure there. Who is Gradual Games? Was it just you? You got musicians, artists?
Gradual Games is me and my wife, Lori.
Okay.
If you're curious, the exact quote by Pavlov is, gradualness, and gradualness. From the very beginning of your work, school yourself to severe gradualness in the accumulation of knowledge.
You said your dad sent you that?
Yeah, I can't remember the context or what, but he told me about that, and then I printed it out and put it on my wall as a teenager. It didn't have much of an effect until I was older, but it stuck with me anyway.
Your dad wouldn't happen to be a professor, would he, Derek?
He is in fact a professor. Yes.
Does he know that he inspired your company name with that quote?
I think he does. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned that to him.
You seem to have a lot of consistency to your programming routine, isn't that right? I recall reading that you set aside like a specific evening every week to work on your games with some regularity.
Yes, I've been working consistently about 3 evenings a week, Saturdays, Sundays, and Wednesdays since the middle of 2008 or so.
Wow, that is a decade.
Yes.
A decade of consistency.
And I always make exceptions for when family's visiting or there's some kind of holiday or something like that.
Well, that's good.
Most of the time, I'm able to carve out at least, say, a half hour or an hour on each of those evenings, if not longer.
Nice.
You said how long each evening?
Well, the bare minimum, a half an hour if lots of other things are going on, but usually an hour or 2, 3 evenings a week. And
So that's
often more. But most of the time it's around that amount.
So we're talking, what is that, like 3 hours a week? 3
to 6.
We're talking, that's like 1,600 hours. That's like 65 days of solid programming over the last decade. Huh. You'll have to pardon my math. I don't think that quite worked out the way I wanted it to.
And to be honest, I don't know. I don't think that would reflect the average, because they're interspersed amongst that are quite a few times where I might work for a full work day on the weekends.
Yeah, you've done some large projects, and you just keep at them until they're finished, which is it's inspiring to see.
For sure.
So, what got you started with NES development? Kind of how did you even learn that homebrewing was a thing, and where'd you begin?
So that's a great question. I think that as a teenager, I had gotten into DOS programming through QBasic, and had been introduced fairly early on that assembly language was something you could use to augment your programs and make them faster and so on. And from there, I encountered people in the QBasic scene who used a lot of assembly language. And then I taught myself assembly language and did some on DOS. And so that gave me some assembly background back then. And then I kind of had this big hiatus through college. And then in my first job, I had a coworker who happened to be also interested in game development and was actually aiming very squarely at entering the game development field professionally. Neither of us were in the field at the time. It was a different type of job, but he wanted to be in that field. But in talking to him a lot about game development, I revealed that I was really interested in somehow revisiting my nostalgia for programming in QBasic and DOS, and that I just liked old school programming. And this coworker of mine named Bill said, Derek likes old stuff, and he was kind of teasing me about it. And I was like, yes, I do like old stuff. And he said, well, if you're really into that kind of thing, then you should check out NES Dev. And he sent me what then was, I think, parodius.nesdev.com or whatever. And I think that piqued my interest at the time because I thought, well, I have a little bit of background in DOS assembly. Maybe I could pick up 6502 assembly. And I joined the forum and started asking questions. And before too long, Roth of Sly Dog Studios actually sent me the NES 101 tutorial by Michael Martin. And that kind of and that combined with seeing Civac making Battle Kid using the Power Pack and so on at the time, all kind of got me started.
Huh. Now,
That's
correct me if
awesome.
I'm wrong, but you have your original NES still, right?
I do.
And you still use it regularly for stuff?
Yep, I do, and it's actually has been RGB modded.
Nice.
And I had been using its new S video port for a while on my Trinitron, but it kind of something, I don't know if it was the Trinitron itself or the RGB board on the NES kind of crapped out, and it like starts shorting out after a while. But thankfully the modder routed through the original composite, so I can still use it as it was.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that would suck if that went out.
Yeah.
What were some kind of influential or favorite games from the NES library that have sort of impacted your, homebrewing, your programming and whatnot?
Well, I would say that my top favorite games from the NES library, because I didn't have very many from when I was a kid, were Kirby's Adventure and Mega Man 5 in particular.
Ooh, good choices, sir.
Very good choices. So the first game you released in the homebrew scene was Nomalos Storming the Castle, a scrolling platformer reminiscent of Mario. The courage to release a game with scrolling as a first project is really admirable. Did you have any reservations going into the project of that magnitude from the start, or did you just figure it would work out?
That's a great question, because scope is a very important thing to consider for an aspiring game developer. Of course, I think that the scrolling wasn't so much. It didn't seem that intimidating to me at the time, because I had some of the stuff that I did in QBasic as a teenager. I had made a simple scrolling engine, so I thought, what could go wrong with doing scrolling on the NES?
So many things.
So there was the scrolling part didn't figure it into it that much at the time. However, I had, by the time I started Anomalous, been working as a professional developer for long enough to realize that if one chooses too many features for a project, it can become a horrific mess very, very, very quickly. And so when I thought about what I wanted to put in Anomalous, I thought, I should make a game with as few features as I can possibly stand. Like, I'm not going to come up with oodles and oodles of items and techniques and moves. I'm just going to have jumping and hitting things, and that's going to be it. And he's going to have maybe 3 weapons max. And I think when I first started, I thought I wouldn't even have 3; I'd just have 1. And the very first scrolling engine that I came up with, Anomalous, only went in one direction, like Super Mario Brothers 1, which actually would simplify certain things. And actually, I didn't realize this at the time, but if I had left it as single scrolling, I could have done destructible environments pretty easily, like Mario did.
Oh, yeah.
But
Nice.
at some point, I'm not sure why, I just decided I wanted to be able to backtrack, and then rewrote the engine to do backtracking.
It's funny, you try to make it as simple as possible, yet you throw scrolling in as the one thing that's going to stay.
Yeah, although interestingly, I having experienced now, or having written Anomalous engine, Anomalous's engine, Owlia's engine, and now Trophy's engine, that just a scrolling engine that is constrained to either vertical or horizontal is not that bad. But when you get into 8-way scrolling, or an engine that has both horizontal and vertical scrolling, that's when you get into the real headaches. And in fact, contrasting my experiences with the two, I was able to rewrite Anomalous's horizontal scrolling engine, I think, in a day, but Owlia's took me like 3 months, and so did Trophy's.
Oh, wow.
So like when you get into having to fiddle with attributes and moving in multiple directions, that's when you get into a lot of headaches. But if you can go in a constrained direction, and you don't have to worry about attribute glitches, because you have the mirroring is sort of designed for scrolling in one direction, and furthermore, you can bake the attributes right into the map format, so you don't have to split them apart with a lot of bit fiddling. You can just blast them right there. It's a heck of a lot easier to think about.
Oh, yeah. So speaking of Owlia, kind of tell us where this game idea came from. Give us some history.
So there's a couple of germinal ideas that contributed to what Owlia became, and one of them was the name, The Legends of Owlia, was a name that I came up with a group of friends in 5th grade. We had like this some kind of extracurricular enrichment type of class together, and I can't remember what the assignment was from the teacher, but we were supposed to invent something, I guess, and I think we decided to invent a video game, not actually program it, but just like write down the idea and describe it and stuff. And I actually can't remember at this point whether it was me or a friend that came up with the name The Legends of Owlia. But
they'll never know. Take the credit.
But as most of them have moved on and probably have, don't care anymore, I kept the name, and I guess I felt like I owned it after a while, because I did try to make The Legends of Owlia in QBasic as a teenager, and those friends with whom I had come up with the idea in 5th grade all knew about it and were involved to varying degrees. But I was the one, attempting to do all this stuff with The Legends of Owlia. So I sort of, if I wasn't the original person that came up with the title, I certainly felt like I owned it at that point. And then in terms of the gameplay mechanic and the main character, I would credit Lori, my wife, the artist, with that. I think it was her idea to have a female elf be the main character. And I think she may have suggested the idea of her being a falconer, but with owls. And then I think from there, that sort of suggested for me, various things the owl could do.
So this initial idea has really evolved over time as, this childhood kind of vision to something very concrete once you started working on it with Lori?
Yeah, like as a kid, I think I didn't really have a story or vision myself. I sort of I did attempt to bring my friends in early in middle school, and my one friend Justin was attempting to write a story for it, and the main character was going to be called Cassius. And then my friend Dan wanted to contribute, and he came up with a secondary character named Dudleyus, and he drew a couple of enemies for the game. And those contributions are still represented in a copy of the QBasic version of Owlia that I still have.
Can you say the heroine's name for us, please?
It's Atlaniel. It's an elvish name.
Atlaniel, okay. I forget what we determined, Kevin.
I don't think we determined that.
Well, I don't think so either.
We tried though. So when you set out to make it, and even through the development of it, like, how did you have any sort of influences from licensed games, or did you strictly stick to like original ideas that you had from either childhood or during the process?
I think early on we were trying to decide whether to make the sprites a chibi style like Zelda, or whether it would be a taller style like, say, Crystallis or Star Tropics. And I'm a pretty big fan of Zelda, Crystallis, and Star Tropics, and so I think it came down to that Lori really wanted to draw a slightly more detailed main character than just a tiny little chibi one.
Those are
And so
huge sprites.
Mhm.
Yes.
So at that point, Star Tropics kind of became the model because it had a taller sprite, and I was a big fan of the game. So just kind of for that reason, and Star Tropics became a game that we sourced for reference for graphics and some aspects of gameplay.
You really don't hear people point to Star Tropics as an influence in their stuff, so that's great to see.
Yeah, it's such a good game.
Yeah, I love that game.
So you mentioned that your day job is a programmer, and for those of us who can't program more than assembly or very little other than assembly, it's hard to really fathom the difference between programming in higher languages at work and then like coming home to program, NES in a lower level language. Like, can you sort of expound on the challenges or differences that are like inherent in this? Do you have like to toggle a switch in your brain to go back and forth?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I'd say that my first programming language was QBasic with a tutor when I was about 13, and there's probably more in common with something like QBasic and modern languages than there is with assembly language, just because you are taught to think in terms of higher level things first. And so I guess once I learned assembly language, a lot of the ways in which I was already thinking about programming, I found the things that match those ideas in assembly language. And so it started to feel pretty natural to sort of, whenever one writes assembly language, coming from a higher level language background, it feels like you're sort of decomposing things that you were used to into smaller pieces. So like an if statement, for example, instead of just saying, if this, then do this block of code, you're saying, load this value, compare it to another value, and then branch if there's some condition met. So it's like breaking, so something that was once felt like one step is now three smaller steps. So it's sort of like you're compiling, I guess.
Oh, it just blows my mind. So, your wife, who happens to be your artist, she's rather talented at the old pixel art. How did you finagle that working relationship? Please, I need some secrets here.
So that's a great question. I think very early on when we were first going to see each other in the summer of 2006, she had mentioned that one of the things she'd always wanted to do is animate for a video game, which probably in some part of my brain sort of sealed the deal right then and there.
Oh, yeah.
Put a ring on it.
But fast forwarding a couple of years to when we would actually start working on things together, before we got into doing the NES, I had been exploring doing the Legends of Owlia with her on a variety of different platforms. And at one point we were trying to put together a game engine on a platform called FreeBasic, which is a modern version of QBasic that compiles on modern systems. And so I was trying to sort of resuscitate my memory of QBasic and apply it to FreeBasic, and at the same time asking Lori to try to draw some sprites. And I think she was using Secret of Mana as a reference at the time. And I think that I kind of flew off the rails and lost motivation and stopped with that attempt. And this was about just 10 years ago, in 2007 or so, maybe 11 or 12 years ago now. And then once that fizzled, we tried to do RPG Maker XP, and Lori made an Atlanteal sprite for that. And I think I also lost motivation in that case. But once we started getting into the NES, and I decided to start Anomalous, things just started to move more smoothly. It's hard to describe. Like it kind of led us along, so to speak. And I'd say it wasn't always easy to acquire Lori's help. I had to persuade her at the beginning, and there were other things she wanted to do with her own time and so on. So it took a while for us to work on to get a rhythm going. But I'd say after this many years doing it, it's become something that she really enjoys doing, I think.
Good. That's awesome.
Yeah, if you can share that type of thing, that's just amazing.
Yep.
I can't imagine anyone wanting to do anything else. Like, how can she even want any other hobbies?
Amazingly, and this surprised me too, amazingly, she's her own person.
The music in Owlia, which you composed, is really great. Can you briefly touch on your musical upbringing?
Sure. So I grew up in a pretty musical household. Both my sisters learned piano and were 10 years older than me, so I heard them practicing a lot of classical piano from an early age. And my dad plays boogie woogie piano, and he improvises boogie, and I've been hearing him belt out boogie woogie since I was a fetus, basically. So there's that, and took a couple of piano lessons as a kid and a teenager, but I hated those. Then I had this awesome guitar teacher at age 17 who completely turned things around for me by telling me I was allowed to just mess around on the scale pattern that he taught me, and I found that so much more interesting than having to play the exact notes on a page, and that kind of flipped a switch in my brain, and I started playing keyboards again at that time, using some of the scale patterns from my guitar lessons actually, and started picking out some tunes from video games that I really liked.
Nice.
And then that kind of turned into improvising on the keyboard. And eventually I met I met someone on a piano forum named Ted, with whom I'm still friends today, who encouraged me to do more piano improvisation. And he actually sent me some audio cassettes of his own piano improvisation playing, and it really inspired me. And between that and taking further piano lessons in college, it sort of gave me a pretty solid ground and understanding of music. And eventually I was able to apply that to Family Tracker alongside this NES development hobby, and was able to compose some songs for Owlia.
So what does that actually look like when you go to sit down and compose a song for the Ice World? Walk us through that.
That's an interesting question. I'd say that my approach to writing a piece of music is I don't really get anything in my head necessarily, but I will sit down with a blank Family Tracker file open, and I'll have my little Korg Nano key next to me.
Clavichord?
And
you got a Korg?
It's a Korg Nano key. It's a tiny little MIDI keyboard.
I want a Korg.
It's
like a synthesizer, right?
Yeah, but it's not even really a synthesizer. It's basically a foot long piece of plastic with buttons on it that are arranged in the shape of a keyboard.
But it's a Korg, so it's like $400 or $500.
No, it's like $50. It's this tiny little USB thing. But because it has the buttons laid out in the shape of a keyboard, it helps me think about music like I would if I was improvising at the piano.
Nice.
So I have that plugged into Family Tracker, which has MIDI support, and I'll just kind of start with something. Usually I'll start with a chord progression or a bass line, and that won't necessarily be consciously chosen. I'll just kind of start with the first chord, and then I'll just try another one based on the variety of chord changes that I'm familiar with from improvisation, and I'll just experiment in that fashion. And once I have something like that I like, then I'll start adding a melody over it. It's amusing how frequently I can put in some phrase in a quasi-random fashion in Family Tracker, and it comes out sounding fairly decent without too many more changes.
Huh.
What a show off.
Well, I mean, it's more like I think that in my experience with improvisation, I've learned not to judge what I'm creating too harshly, and so things tend to flow more easily.
So when you started composing the music for Owlia, did you want to sort of make it to where multiple motifs played across different levels music? Did you want to make an overarching theme, or does each song sort of stand on its own?
I think I wanted to make a new song for every single level, and I think I wound up reusing the mountain theme in the island area, which I'm kind of sad about. I would have liked to have had a unique song for each one, but I think I was still fairly new to composing and Family Tracker, so it was a little harder for me to make a really full soundtrack for the game.
Hey, any game with a pirate shanty in it, it's a winner in my book. Which is a disproportionate number of homebrews have that in them, so you're in good company. Looking back and stuff, because this took you, what, 3.5 years to finish Owlia, right?
Yeah.
Are you happy with how it turned out? Do you feel like, your skills improved versus what was in Nomalos and whatnot? Like, how do you feel about it?
I think I am happy about how it turned out. Like, I'm keenly aware of a lot of the flaws that it has, and I'm keenly aware of some of my original goals of scope for the game, and contrasting those with how it turned out, that can tempt me to feel like I didn't quite hit what I wanted to. But just evaluating Owlia for what it is and playing it, I realized that it did turn out to be pretty fun and people like it, and that makes me happy. So I mean, I'm happy with it.
Is there anything you would have done differently? Did you find yourself sort of backed into any design corners in the process of making the game?
Yeah, I definitely was. I definitely think if I were going to make another Zelda-like in the future, I almost certainly would not have 8-way scrolling anywhere in the game. I would have made it single screen. And the reason is that getting that 8-way scrolling engine to work was extremely time consuming. And then after that, because I was sort of infected by the earworm of NES dev of removing all glitches whatsoever, I worked on a constant timed VBlank routine to keep a 16 pixel wide bar at the top to hide all scrolling glitches. And that particular approach was probably one of the most insanely difficult approaches you could choose to remove all glitches. And I don't know how many weekends I must have sunk into tweaking and retweaking that bar and making it work in a variety of different situations. It's a real shame that I spent that much time on something technical when I could have been pouring all of that time into gameplay. So that's probably my biggest regret of the project. If I had made that entire project single screen, I could have, I think I could have put some more interesting gameplay. Maybe I could have made the game totally open like Zelda, for instance.
Well, that sort of answers my next question. I was going to ask, was there ever a plan to connect the overworld areas? Or is that something that you toned down because of memory or time constraints?
Yeah, that's definitely something I wanted to make it open at one point, but then I decided I could feel the scope getting away from me in the future. Like I could kind of see that if I tried to make the game open and have 8-way scrolling and everything else I wanted, that I would absolutely never finish the project. So I backpedaled heavily and decided to sort of make this hybrid where I'd have single screen scrolling in the dungeons so that certain aspects were a lot easier to pull off, like how to manage enemies and so on, but still keep the 8-way scrolling because I spent so much time on it for the overworld. And it still felt fun to run around on the overworld and fight and find gold and stuff, but I think that part of the challenge with making an NES game is that since things can be extremely time-consuming and can take so long, that it was very difficult for me anyway to let go of something. Like with Owlia, I didn't have the confidence yet to decide what I really wanted out of the game design. It was more like I made something and then I was going to keep what I made and run with it and see what kind of game I can make out of what I spent so much time in, spent so much time working on, rather than deciding, no, this isn't what I really wanted. I'm going to throw it out and I'm going to start over. So that had a big impact on the design of the game, I think.
Interesting.
Well, you can just take all those ideas for the sequel.
Yeah, maybe.
So you're kind of interesting in the homebrew scene because you really only have 3 projects. Most of us, we've had failed games that never got done, or weekend ideas that we explored and we're like, this is garbage. But you really only have 3. You've got Nomalos, Owlia, and now Trophy, which is your 3rd game. It's been enjoyable to kind of watch your skills evolve over time. From Nomalos to Owlia was a big leap, and I think even more so the leap from Owlia to Trophy is just huge. So what can players expect to see with Trophy?
Well, so Trophy's a platformer based very heavily on Mega Man, and it has both horizontal and vertical scrolling levels. It's not 8-way scrolling; it just has levels that are either horizontal or vertical, just like Mega Man, basically. Although,
Nice.
to be honest, I don't think Mega Man games ever actually scrolled vertically. They would scroll between screens vertically, but they wouldn't have any smooth scrolling vertical sections. So in that sense, Trophy's probably more like the Metroid engine, although it's not a free open world like Metroid, but it does have smooth vertical scrolling and smooth horizontal scrolling. So there's that, and all of the bosses of Trophy are kind of like the final bosses of Mega Man. They're all enormous and take advantage of MMC3 scanline counters to make the bosses scroll around against a static floor. So there's those technical features that are beyond stuff I've done before.
Nice.
I mean, it's super impressive. Those bosses, I think, are the largest bosses out of any NES game, period, that I've seen.
I don't know if that's true. There's definitely some really big ones, scrolling bosses at the end of several Mega Man games, for sure.
Oh, yeah, but there's always like 3, maybe 4, whereas like every single boss in your game is just giant.
Yeah, I thought it would be fun. Like, actually, when I made Anomalous, I kind of wanted to make all the bosses huge for that game. But I think just due to our experience level at the time, we wound up backpedaling a little bit, and we're only able to manage making the dragon and the final boss, Boulder, huge. And then the Grubsalem Bodge was sort of big because it had that mountain background, but the boss was really just that face flying around. So we really only had 2 big bosses in Anomalous, but this time we have 9.
If I ever get that far in Nomelos, I will confirm or deny that.
And I think I partly wanted to. I think I partly was inspired to somewhat outdo Battle Kid in a way in this respect, because I think it had 8 large. Maybe they weren't all large. I can't remember, but they had 8 or 9 bosses in Battle Kid 1 or 2, and I thought I wanted to at least match that with this third game.
I don't think they were all big in Battle Kid, because there was that color mage.
Yeah,
Girl.
I'm remembering that now. There were a couple of sprite-based ones, but there certainly were some large and impressive-looking ones. And yeah, I wanted to do that.
I enjoy that you see what other people are doing and it inspires you to do great things.
To do better things. That's
yeah.
awesome.
Well, not necessarily better, but you know,
Better.
the challenge is there. It's a living challenge to exceed your peers. That's awesome.
Yeah, Anomalous, right around when I was working on Anomalous, that was right around the time that Julius of Morphcat Games was making Super Bat Puncher.
I've heard of this.
I remember being like just completely mind blown by Super Bat Puncher, and I was thinking to myself back then, I was like, oh, I'm never gonna make a game that good. Oh my god, this is amazing. I think one of the things that I thought was so cool about Super Bat Puncher was that the screen shook when you hit something. I just thought that's so cool, and so I thought I have to put this Anomalous. So I put screen shaking Anomalous because of Super Bat Puncher.
So backing up to Owlia one more time, do you have a favorite piece of music from the game that you'd like us to feature?
From Owlia?
Yeah.
I guess I'm partial to the mountain theme, which is sort of intended to be the main hero theme of the game.
Interesting choice.
Well, we will give that a listen right after these 3 questions. What's your favorite homebrew of all time?
My favorite homebrew of all time. I think I'm gonna have to say Mad Wizard.
Ooh.
#agree. And your favorite homebrewer of all time?
Sly Dog Studios.
Man.
Rob is paying some people off is what he's doing.
That man's got talent. Plus he loves Rocky. I mean, what could be better? Nothing. Do you have a favorite Baroque composer of all time?
A favorite Baroque composer? Oh, favorite Baroque. I thought you said broke.
They're all broke.
They're probably broke too.
Favorite Baroque composer. I guess I'd probably have to say Scarlatti. Yeah, Scarlatti's my favorite. I just love how his music has there's so many really, really catchy like riffs in his music. Like I have a boxed set of all of his harpsichord sonatas, and so many of them have this wonderfully catchy dance type of tune, and it really does sound like a riff because they'll play this little melody and it will repeat like 3 or 4 times before there's any changes, just like it would be like a riff in a rock song almost. And I just find it really really listenable, whereas sometimes Bach gets a little bit too dense and intellectual to really enjoy. I like things that are catchy and kind of make me want to bang my head like metal or something.
Which, for those that don't know, the music in Nomelos was Baroque inspired, correct?
Yeah, well, actually, most of the Nomelos soundtrack actually is by Domenico Scarlatti.
Oh.
There's a couple of pieces by Bach and a piece by, I don't even know how to pronounce his name, Pancrase Royer or something.
That's how I'd say it.
And then also Rameau, one piece by Rameau, which is also a really cool composer, but most of it's Scarlatti. And there's one song I wrote, which is the boss music.
I can see Paul Giamatti right now going, "You call this Rameau?" And anyway, sorry, Kevin.
I was gonna tell our listeners to go do homework and look them up, but they don't have to. They just need to go play Nomelos.
Yeah, which is available as a free ROM release, just like Owlia. So
gradualgames.com.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, thanks for coming on, Derek. And here is the mountain theme from The Legends of Owlia.
Well, that was fascinating as can be, as always. And I always enjoy his music.
Yes, always really, really good.
It's just very well done. But what's been happening with you, Kevin?
Beau, so much has been going on with me, and it's exciting.
You always say that.
Well, it's finally actually something tangible and exciting to everyone listening because it's NES related. So
Sneak and Peek 2.
Sneak and Peek 2. No, definitely not Sneak and Peek 2.
Oh.
God, why does Sneak and Peek 1 even exist? I have started an escape room type game with a local friend of mine named Kendall Howard. She did a lot of the writing of coming up with the story, and she and I and her sister Chelsea, we all got together and sort of came up with some puzzles, and we fleshed out this idea. But an idea is only as good as what a graphic artist can present graphically. So I sort of put some feelers out to try to lure in some untapped talent, which never seems to happen because, you know, in the past I've gone out and gone after people who are known and who are reliable, and I've paid them money to actually, give me graphics, which have questionable results. But this time I stumbled across this guy named John. He has this YouTube channel called Peekabrews, which some of you may or may not have heard of, and if you haven't, definitely check them out. But he did not even realize he had this talent for creating NES art. He sent me sort of a message that was half serious, half joking, oh, hey, I can make you some art in MS Paint. And I was like, oh, can you? Well, let's see what you got. Yeah, and actually you inspired him with your talk of MS Paint on this podcast. So that made him think that he too could possess this talent.
Oh, that warms my heart.
Yeah, I sent him some programs, some NES specific programs like NES Screen Tool, Tile Layer Pro. Tried to sort of give him some guidelines for what it takes to, some of the rules for making art for the NES. And my God, this guy has churned out some of the most impressive stuff I've ever seen. So he is as motivated as I've seen in a human being. So this game is going to happen, and I'm very excited. So I've brought him on. I took to Twitter also to try to find a musician to make some music for us. Got some amazing submissions from different people, but the
old
guy
and
who
new,
ended up
right?
getting the job, yeah, old and new. Some people that were making chiptune music back in the 90s, just sort of all across the board. Got some really good submissions, but this guy named Trojan Horse sent me some stuff. He actually put together some ideas specific for this game we're working on, and I sort of let everyone in the dev team have a vote of who they wanted to pick, and unanimously we all went with Trojan Horse for different reasons, but
sneaking
very
into
excited.
a living room near you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Watch
Is
out
that
for
a
them.
condom joke?
No, it's an ancient Greek joke.
Troy, can we make it a condom joke?
Yeah, we can always make it a condom joke.
All right. But what's really fascinating to me is I have these 3 people now who are completely new to the scene, and there's something inherently exciting about that. So we're all fresh and excited.
Except
and
you.
I think everyone's no, even me, man. Well, I'm not. Are you saying I'm not new or not excited?
Not fresh.
Oh,
Not
yeah,
new.
I'm definitely not
Yeah,
fresh.
no.
I mean, no, man, but I'm really excited. This project is moving very quickly, and some of the puzzles we have come up for in this game are so damn clever. I can't wait for everyone to give it a try. And as if the game itself is not awesome enough, I've programmed in Super Nintendo mouse support, so you can play this game with the mouse, my friend.
Seems like you would need an adapter for that.
You would, if only I knew someone who made them.
If only we both did.
Well, maybe someone we know will contact me and help us out.
Perhaps. And if you happen to already own the Spookatron adapter for the Super Nintendo, it will work with the mouse.
Absolutely. So we're going to have a demo available at MagFest. So if you are showing up to MagFest, we hope to have at least the first chapter of the game fully playable.
Well,
so,
that's news to me.
Hey, I can't tell you everything, Beau.
I know. That's awesome, though. You've posted pictures on Twitter of what the game looks like, right?
I've posted pictures on Twitter, but what's really exciting to me is the pictures I'm posting are not in the game. They're all red herrings.
Oh.
But it's just going to give you a taste graphically of what you might see.
You sneaky devil. I guess I've been privy to some animated GIFs that... GIFs.
Yes, those stay between us.
Oh, okay. I'll quit posting those. Delete. That's been one of the, we were talking earlier about things that have changed in the community. Like, the community started off with asking for submissions from random new people. And, Dave shows up and does the art for Battle Kit. And that was just like, whoa, dude, this is amazing. And then all of a sudden, we shifted to kind of developers were paying for quality assets. And now suddenly we're back to random solicitations, I hope, maybe.
Well, I mean, I've found that people that are motivated for the sake of creation seem to be more motivated than, and it's strange because you'd think that people that are being paid for their work would be a little more, I don't want to say reliable, because that sounds, I guess, that has negative connotations to it.
It does.
It seems like I'm getting much faster returns from people that are in it because they're excited to be part of the project.
So if I said, I need RPG art, please send any submissions to assemblyline@gmail.com, that would be something that I might have some success with?
It might, but you might want to use the correct email address, which is nesassemblyline@gmail.com.
Ah, well, that's interesting.
Only then will you actually get the submissions.
Whose email have I been checking all these months? Huh. Oh, that's weird.
That's what I've been up to. What have you been up to, Beau?
Unlike you, I actually made my way out to Portland this year. We can't all be, living lifestyles of the rich and famous on cruise ships in the middle of hurricanes.
Well, I got to get my kicks where I can get them.
I think you got a massive discount from the hurricane cruise, is what I think.
Hey, I went ziplining in Belize. It was awesome.
I don't even... Is that like Discovery Land? Is that like a chain place, Belize?
No, Belize. It's a country in Central America.
Get out of here. So I went to Portland, which is not Belize and not very exciting.
You better Belize it.
Oh, okay. You've been waiting a while for that.
It was unbelievable.
Okay. We're going to have to cut you off. Yeah, so I made my way out to Portland, as I tend to do every year, because I kind of wrap a family trip into it and, visit nephews. And
a family vacation?
Oh, wow. No. We'll talk about that some other day. Well played, though. So yeah, Portland. We had the usual crew, sans Kevin and Tim. Brian from Retro USB, he was out there, and Sergio, and Tim and Greg from Retrotainment, and various other people. Frank. Golly, I always forget Frank. Frank was there. And who else? Oh, Jason from Retro USB support, things like that. So, we had our usual crew, but we also had, Chris Cacciatore came out, which was wonderful to meet him in person. He did Nebs and Debs and did the art for Spoogatron. He's done some art for an undisclosed project that I may or may not be revealing at some point in the future. And it rhymes with RPG. It was just nice. It was nice to meet him, to talk with him finally in person, even though he escaped somehow and I didn't get to take him out for drinks. But Chris, Optimon, Chris has been doing, he did Pyronaut with MT a while back, which never got released, but it's very far along, which we talked about earlier, maybe, unless that was edited out. And he has been working on a game called Raleigh, which I'm sure I'm mispronouncing. It's probably Rolly, because you roll places. So that was neat to see. This is like the second year he's had that there. It's good to talk to him. INL, the famous, majestic, Infinite NES Lives Paul was there. I got to tell him.
Had you met him before?
No, I've never met him in person. We talked to him. We've talked to him on
exciting.
Here. So Paul was there with his wife, Lauren, and they were just wonderful. Like, somehow they had their parents or in-laws take care of the kids, and they got to escape to Portland, and like meeting him in person was a real treat. And pretty much to everybody who I met in Portland, I was very tired the whole trip. So I was not myself. I'm sorry. But yeah, it was great to sort of see everybody. We had some fans, which always weirds me out that people know what we do. Sean showed up, a fellow who I'd been conversing with through Kickstarter and online. He was like, "Hey," and I was like, "Oh my goodness, that's you!" And so we talked for a good long while. Like, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, though I know I have. We are very approachable people. Come find us at shows. We will talk your ear off, and we'd love to hear what you have to say about whatever. So PSC, he's done sort of a Mario Kart-ish thing for the NES and Billionaire Banshee and some other stuff. He showed up, showed me some of his progress on things. A guy named Kyle was like, "Hey, you owe me some Virtual Boy controller instructions." Like, oh crap. That's another thing you can get at the shows. When you tell me that I owe you something, I can usually tell you that I'll get it to you very, very soon. So that's always interesting. But yeah, it was just nice to... It was nice to see some people, to meet some people, and I hardly even realized the show was going on, but it was a good time.
Was the kid there?
Dude, he became a moody teenager. What the crap?
He was such bright-eyed with such like optimism and such a future in NES dev ahead of him, and now he's moody?
Tell the listeners who the kid is.
All right, so we're at this booth, right? We're at our booth. We're just, talking to people and hawking our wares and, doing the grind, the expo grind, as we like to say.
We say that?
Yeah, we don't. But this kid approaches us, and he has this enthusiasm that I guess, when you're that age, you're just filled with it. But like, I just haven't come into contact with anyone with that kind of enthusiasm in quite some time.
This is a 12-year-old, by the way.
Yeah, he might be 12. He's so young. But what he's enthusiastic about is NES development. Like, a kid at this age knows, like, he's getting into assembly language. Like, I was so excited. He hung out for like probably an hour. Like, he was there with his parents, and they'd like, yeah, he's there with his parents. Like, you know, he talks to us for a while. He shuffles around sort of the expo center. He comes back later. He like talks to us some more. Like, we were so hyped for this kid. The next year, he shows up again. Like, he comes and talks to us. We talk about NES dev. Like, he listens to the podcast. It was just so cool. So, like, I didn't get to make it this year. So I was so excited to, like, hear about the kid. And Beau says he turns into a moody teenager.
I didn't even see him. Somebody else spotted him. They're like, that's the kid. And he's avoiding us. And I was like, oh, no. Like, what happened? And I was like, oh, that age.
Maybe he found out about girls.
Oh, definitely. He was not with his parents. He was with a friend. Like, what are we going to do? We need this kid back. This kid is the future. And we've all been there. We all went through that phase.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's hilarious. We'll get him back.
Hopefully the kid comes around. Yeah, we'll still
he'll come around.
Kid, if you're still listening to the podcast,
he is.
We'll be here when you're ready, buddy.
We'll always be here. Right now, we're the nerdy people who you don't want to associate with, but one of these days, you'll find out that we're still nerdy. You just want to be one of us.
And you might find a girl who's into the nerdy stuff that you're into.
Or you convince her you're not into those things, you marry her, then about 2 years in, you pull out all this nerdy stuff, and you're like, you're stuck with me, woman.
Is that the bait and switch?
Oh, did I bait and switch her? Is that what that's called? Huh. Well, that's good to know.
So Portland was overall a good experience?
Oh, it was, yeah. I mean, it's always amazing. I always love seeing everybody. I stayed in a room with a bunch of night owls. So like I said, I got like 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night, which was just brutal. I'm going to strangle Tim. Golly. These guys don't sleep at night. What's their problem?
I don't know, man. I need my sleep. If I don't get my 7 or 8 hours, you don't want to meet that Kevin.
Well, that's why I like rooming with you and Jason and Tim from Orab Games, not Tim from Retrotainment, because you all go to bed at a decent hour.
We are old and we like our sleep.
2 a.m. hits and Tim from Retrotainment and Greg, they're like, party's starting. I'm like, nope, it's not. And I'm just like in the corner asleep, and I think they were drawing on my face. I'm not really certain, but
were there pictures and arrows toward your mouth?
Oh, generally.
Oh, okay.
The one night I woke up at, 5 a.m. like I tend to, and I'm like, man, this is a lumpy bed. And at some point I realized Sergio's sleeping in the bed next to me. I'm like, I'm glad I didn't like roll across and snuggle up throughout the night.
Well, I mean,
you might have been a little surprised.
A life goal is to sleep with Sergio, so I applaud you for making that happen, sir.
Oh, achievement crossed off. Yeah, well, he was in a different bed the other night. Why did he show up in my bed the second night?
He's, yeah.
Well, one of the other exciting parts about PRGE was that a program that I worked on that was released on cartridge, so some might call it a game, was released. Like, it debuted. I did Tim from Retrotainment. I hate that we have to differentiate, but there's just like 5 names in the community, so it's always Brian from wherever, Kevin from wherever, Tim from wherever. When I was staying at his house and we did the Mega Man thing, the re-release, the Legacy cartridge, we worked on this project for the Classic Tetris World Championships, aka the CTWC, which was an archive card. It had history, it had past results, whatnot. It also had a screen where like blocks fell, and as they cleared the lines, they showed people's names, ranks, whatever. And we worked on that together, and that was released in Portland, which was kind of cool to see. Like, usually my releases are very anticlimactic because I do them myself and I'm always behind and blah, 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 blah. But with this one, like, we handed it off and they released it there, and, Vince, Uncle Tusk had boxes and it was there for sale. Like, I don't think people realized it was the previous year. They just had a cartridge with a label. There was no circuit board in it. And this year there was actually like a program to run to kind of commemorate the competition, which was fun. Because there was a new winner this year, too. Some 16-year-old ousted Jonas who has held the championship title for the last, 7 years. So that was awesome to see.
Well, it was very crazy to me because when you went off to the land of Pennsylvania to help Entertainment guys with their Mega Man release, I had no idea that you were working on this Tetris cartridge. So when you came back and you sent me the ROM, you're like, hey, check out this thing that I worked on. You know, you've sent me little demos and things for so long of like your works in progress, or, you know, little parts of your RPG stuff, just little tech demos that were showcasing different things. You sent me this Tetris thing and it blew me away. Like, I couldn't believe how polished it was.
Thank you.
Around. So can people like check out that ROM online at all, or is it just like you had to buy a cartridge to kind of see this?
You had to buy a cartridge, and I don't think any information has circulated that it even exists, because it's not a game. Like, it didn't hit the usual game buyers. So I don't even know what's happening with the extra copies. Like, I assume they'll be sold at some point, but it was a neat project, primarily because it was a chance for Tim and I to work together. And like, I don't normally work with other people in that capacity. Like, I contract out art or music. I don't go head to head 50-50. We're going to make decisions. He designed most of the screens. I just implemented them. It was so nice to not have to do every last thing myself. Oh,
you guys did a heck of a job. I mean, some of the programming tricks that you had to do, I was very impressed. I don't even think I could do some of that stuff. So,
he had vision, man.
My hat's off to the both of you for sure.
So what's been happening in the community lately?
Oh, a lot's been going on.
As our Canadian friends would say.
Well, I mean, if you want to sort of compound from the last podcast episode, where I sort of put out a call for people making levels for the Incident 2.
Oh, yeah.
I released a standalone level creator.
Free ROM.
Online. Yes, a free ROM for online. So if anyone did not find that, I released it on Twitter. And actually you can go to, well, I don't remember the direct URL. It's on my website. But if you go to Twitter, you can scroll down my feed. You can find the direct link and download it. Make levels, send them in to me. And I have gotten probably 20 or so levels. 20 levels does not make a game, so it's definitely not something that I can release yet. But when's all said and done, if I don't have enough to make and release a full game with, you know, I'll put the levels together and sort of release it to the community. So definitely, if you have any interest, continue to put those together and send them my way, because some of the levels I've gotten in are pretty dang cool.
Yeah, I'm excited to see. I wish I could come up with levels for your game, but I don't have a creative Sokoban bone in my body.
But other than that, I think Brian's done coding the 2018 Christmas cartridge that our Patreon supporters have been able to download.
So what does that mean for those of us like myself that do not do this thing we call social media?
Well, we have a Patreon page at patreon.com/NESassemblyline, and on it we've sort of been posting a progression of Brian's development stages of this 2018 skiing game, and we posted what he thinks is the final ROM a couple weeks ago. So you can go there straight to that's right there on our main Patreon page. And if you are a donator, you can download that free of charge.
Man, this is a wild world.
Yeah. It's cool, man. It's the first time we've done anything like this, and I don't know of anyone else that's done anything like this, so it's been cool to be a part of. And the game is actually probably the most fun. It's the most fun I've had on one of his Christmas games. Maybe, I mean, it's up there with the pinball game. I have a lot of fun playing the ski game.
I feel kind of bad admitting this, but I had no clue any of this was happening.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he mentioned it in Portland. He was like, you know, those dev ROMs, and I was like, the what?
So you're half of this podcast, and you didn't even know it was happening.
Yeah,
that's hilarious.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so Brian's apparently done this really cool thing where he gives Patreon supporters the ROM, and I'm just sitting here going, what?
Yeah, so it's sort of a port-ish. It's like a reimagining of the old MS-DOS Windows game Ski Free, and because
Minesweeper.
No, Minesweeper has been
Solitaire.
Ski Free, Beau. Ski Free.
Ski Free. Okay.
Yeah. So I snuck in some snowboarders. So if you want to replace skiers with some snowboarders, you can press, I think it's select on the title screen, and it will swap out all the graphics into snowboarders, which is way more badass. I mean, let's be honest.
You kids, you 90s kids.
But what else has been going on?
I'm still stunned that people can get access to Xmas 18 early, but including myself, I've been downloading all of his ROMs that he posts, privately, but haven't actually opened one.
You need to check it out, Beau. It's a lot of fun.
Maybe the next episode we will just feature Xmas 2018.
Ooh,
how about that?
There's an idea. Let's do that.
We'll see if it flies. What else has been going on? How about Super Homebrew War?
Ooh, yeah, let's talk about Super Homebrew War. That's by Nathan Talbert, right?
Talbert.
No,
Talbert.
It's not that.
No,
it's Talbert.
Talbert. Yeah. So he has made the wonderfully self-referential fighting game that kind of incorporates all of the community's characters and weapons into a 2-player head-on-head fighting game.
Yeah, it's kind of like Super Smash Brothers-esque, but he takes like levels from different homebrew games and characters from different homebrew games and puts them in this one-on-one fighting situation. It's so cool.
This is his entry for the 2019 NestDev competition. And do you have any of your stuff in there by chance?
You know it. The
like what?
Player 1 from Study Hall is in the game, along with a very nice Study Hall-esque level. Really cool.
Yeah, and he took the Spaceman from Spookatron, which was drawn by Chris Cacciatore, of course, and that's in there. And I because it was an 8x8 sprite, he blew it up to be huge. It's like 16x16, but still the same like
proportions,
pixels, and everything. So it's fun and blocky. But yeah, it's really neat to like see somebody take everything that we've done and kind of cameo it into a game and call it good.
Yeah, it's sort of like a greatest hits collection of homebrew characters. It's so cool, like seeing them all in the same game.
Well, he also let his kids draw characters, and he's got like 4 kids and they're varying ages, but like the 3 or 4-year-old drew this. It looks like a piece of toast with arms and legs. And that is definitely a character you can play as and destroy other characters with.
Nice.
They're his testers. He's got to honor them.
Absolutely. I mean, he put in a lot of effort making those testers, so I mean, you may as well get some work out of them.
Making those testers. Yeah. I don't need people. I can make my own people.
Did you see that that company Limited Run Games released an NES game, Golf, which is a...
You mean golf?
No, it's Golf.
You mean like golf with Alf?
It is Golf with Alf. No, it's
Golf.
It's a mini game from a Switch game called Golf Story, which is a super fun game. Who knew that combining golf with an RPG would make such a fun experience?
Can I raise my hand very high right now?
I'm going to call that a GRPG, but yes.
No, it's an SPRPG, sports RPG.
Oh, okay. My apologies.
Fool.
But man, like they took the golf, like they sort of took the NES Golf and sort of reimagined it inside this Switch game, but they thought it would be fun to actually take that game out of the Switch game and give it a standalone release. And that was programmed by
Thomas, not Tomas, but Thomas Guinan, who did Eskimo Bob and the Alfonso game.
Yeah, so this game was released on Limited Run Games and sold out pretty much immediately.
Don't get me started on that.
Oh, I was right there with you trying to score a copy, but alas, we are
galfless. I'm pissed. Like, it literally... Galfless, yes. Hashtag galfless. That stupid thing sold out within 3 seconds, maybe 1 second.
Yeah, and then they found, I guess, they canceled some duplicate orders by some people and put up a second batch that also sold out immediately. So there was just...
I think Limited Run generally does a second batch. Like they stagger their orders throughout the day, like the first day, at least into 2. But yeah, both times. I had one in the cart at one point, but I was like, oh, I don't understand how Limited Run Games works. It says this one's out of stock. So I refreshed the page and it was like, now you have nothing in your cart. And I was like, you piece of crap. I was pissed.
Yeah, that's a bummer. But it's cool that an NES homebrew did so well on a traditional like indie game market.
Yeah, 2,000 copies within a second. Yeah, that's pretty darn
Yeah,
good.
nothing
I'd
to
say.
sneeze at.
Yeah. I still want a copy.
Yeah.
If you want your name mentioned on this podcast, please send a copy to the NES assembly line at gmail.com.
2 copies, please.
Oh, okay. No, just send one to me. Hey, Kevin has no say. Yeah, but it'll be exciting to see what that's about. And just kind of the whole thing of like this tiny little subcategory of indie gaming that we do called homebrew that has now been kind of worked into some sort of mainstream big company release stuff.
It's weird. I mean, it just goes to show that marketing plays a huge part in things, you know?
And if you'd like to be in marketing for Soul Goose Productions, go to nesassemblyline at gmail.com.
You're taking submissions there also, huh?
Yes, I will take any and all submissions.
All right, well, let's talk about shmup speed for a second.
You mean shrimp?
No, well, it depends on who you're asking, but shmup speed.
Oh, snap.
So Douglas Glover, who goes by Gloves online,
or Gloves Off Gaming.
Yes, there you go. Every year he takes part in this charity event for a charity called Extra Life, and he tries to raise money. Do you know offhand anything about Extra Life?
Yeah, it's he raises money for the Children's Hospital, the Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto, which when I lived in Toronto, I remember walking by all the time and going, that's a hospital for kids in need. That's kind of cool. And then I would, go about my day, but it's this giant structure, and he spent time there as a child. I think he said his legs went out and he could no longer walk, and he went to this hospital, and over months they fixed him. Whatever, I forget exactly what disease he had.
Wow.
But, it played a huge role in his personal life, and so he has raised money for this charity ever since, or not ever since, but since he became an adult. And each year he tries to do something, but this year he decided to do this cart release, which Kevin programmed this thing called Shmup Speed, which is what?
So basically, Shmup Speed is it's a game, but it basically is a tool that shows you how many button presses you are pressing per second. So it's basically a shooter Galaga type shooting game, but there are no enemies. You're just basically firing bullets as fast as you can to get your button presses per second.
Which seems super lame, but he explained it to me a little bit. Like there's some history here. Hudson, who made a lot of shooting games, they until sometime in the 2000s released these things called Hudson shooting watches, and it was this little device that you just pressed buttons on, and it told you how many times you pressed the button. Like these are actual devices you can find on eBay.
Huh.
And they're pretty cool. And so this project was kind of an NES version of that, which I think is neat. Like it has full new appreciation in my view because of that.
Yeah, so
did you know that when you made it?
No, absolutely not. He came to me with the idea of potentially programming it for him, and he had it all in. He had it envisioned in his head very, very strongly. He had
that's all we need.
He had the designs mapped out. He had sort of the animations of how he wanted things to come on screen, and that was a fun challenge for me because some of his ideas. Probably like when I think of like how I want to do things on the NES, like if anything is untraditional, I immediately think, oh, well, I can't do that. That would just be a little bit too hard to do on the NES. But the way he sort of presented it to me, this is how I want to do it. I thought, I don't think I can do that. And then I stopped to think, okay, maybe I can find a way of how to do that. So it turned out it looks super pretty. Like the menu system and everything. It just looks pretty. There's like an elegance to it. So I'm very happy that he pushed me to push myself. And the end product is very, very beautiful.
It is very nice looking. I was very impressed when I fired it up and I was like, dang, Kevin, you're growing, son.
Oh, you impressed me and I impressed you. This is a nice,
it's a happy
podcast.
Day. And then you somehow threw my name into the mix for, hey, this guy will do boxes and carts and all that crap. So this became sort of a group project where I did some of the physical production. Aaron E., he printed the boxes for me, sent them to me. Actually, he cut them out for me too, which was awesome. Then I just assembled that, the manuals and the labels. And then a fellow named SNES Cube 64 PS1 DSi XL, something like. He's got a bunch of consoles in his name, whatever that's about. Matt, he did the PCBs because the guy is just sort of a wizard with doing circuitry, and then he also ordered he sourced the parts, the carts from China and whatnot. All that got sent to me with Kevin's ROM. I sort of put it all together and then shipped them out last Friday, and they should be arriving in people's hands tomorrow, which will be after the fact by the time this goes to air, but still. Yeah. Oh, and how did they release it?
Well, he actually did an auction on Nintendo Age for 5 copies.
A cash grab, limited LE auction?
I mean, how do you say that something that is raising money for such a worthy charity is a cash grab? I mean, it's just... It's ridiculous to even say that. I mean, this...
I would only say that if the fool, just the foolish person he is, gave every last cent to charity and didn't keep a dime even to cover his own parts. But that wouldn't happen, would it?
That happened. I mean, every dollar that was raised for this went to charity. I got no money. You got no money. I mean, we wanted to do this for him, and he wanted to do it for this charity. This Extra Life charity. So some very, very high bids came in. So he raised his goal. Like, he does a 24-hour stream, I believe, to raise money. That's what he's done in the past. This year he did this sort of cartridge release in addition to that. He had a goal in mind of what he wanted to do total between the auction and his 24-hour stream, and this auction alone raised more money than he anticipated for his whole goal. So it did very well.
Yeah, and it was great to see, like, people. I mean, they were getting something, in the end if they end up winning. But every last dollar they gave went to sick kids in need. Yeah. So that was just awesome.
You just don't see that kind of thing happening. So it was.
I've seen charity auctions in the community, and they're always pocketing some for parts or they're doing whatnot. But like, this guy was just 100% honest, and he didn't even, the money didn't even pass through his hands. He really wanted bidders just to give it straight to the charity, and just the whole thing was amazing to see.
Yeah, it was very special to be a part of, so I was happy to help, and I'm sure you were happy to help.
Oh, I didn't realize I was helping with something like that. I just thought I was, I was like, okay, I'm part of something, but then it was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Like, I'm really proud to be a part of this now.
Yeah. So hopefully we can come up with something for next year. I don't know what he has in mind or if he even wants to include us, but absolutely would love to be part of it.
Oh, yeah. It's hard to not want to be a part of something like that.
So as always, we appreciate everyone tuning in. If you want to find more information on me, I can be found on Twitter at A Ton of Glaciers, and of course, Beau can be found on Twitter at Soulgoose.
And if you need more information, just send a private message. I don't always answer public tweet things, so sorry. Continue. I don't. I'm a private person. Just send me a message.
Do you have your direct messages open for people that don't follow you or that you don't follow?
That's a thing?
Yes, it is. If you don't follow people, they can't message you directly unless you change that option.
Oh, I'll just force people to keep following me, I guess.
And of course, if you have any questions, concerns, comments, you can reach us at nesassemblyline@gmail.com. We will answer any questions on future episodes. We haven't gotten any in a while. And I actually have an idea for a contest, so I'm just going to throw this contest out for anyone who's still listening to this episode. If you want to win some free games that I myself have made, yeah, I'll send you a copy of The Incident. I'll send you a copy of Scramble. Whatever you want. You just tell me. Peek? No, let's not get crazy here, Beau.
Okay, all right.
So, how do you win these free games? I'm going to tell you how. If you go to iTunes and leave a review of this podcast, tell the world how much you love it or don't love it. We'd prefer if you tell how much you love it, but you do you. And
we'll take honesty.
Yeah, after you leave that review, if you also email us at nesassemblyline@gmail.com, basically with a copy of your review, just so we can kind of see it directly, and we'll, of course, double check that you posted it publicly. I'm going to do a raffle, so I'm going to give away, let's just say, one of each of my games. So 2 lucky winners.
6 copies of each game to the lucky winner.
6 copies to one person?
Well, yeah, you're paying $50 a level for The Incident too, right?
Beau, I'm gonna have to find a new co-host. So I'll give away one. Let's just start with one copy of The Incident and one copy of Scramble. So 2 winners I'll give away this go round, and maybe we'll do this again in the future. So leave some reviews and email us. Let us know you did it, and we will announce the winners on the next episode, which may or may not be for 2018 Christmas cartridge.
I may have to submit a review because I'm missing a copy of Scramble, so we'll see.
Well, you know.
You'll at least have one.
Well, we can't have that because you're not winning.
Yeah,
Spoiler
beat my
alert.
review. That's your goal.
Lastly, of course, we are on Patreon, patreon.com/NES Assembly Line. You can donate to help us pay for some of the costs for hosting on SoundCloud and some other things. There are, us putting this out is free to you, but it's not free to us. So any cent that you can give definitely goes toward helping us out here, and it'll help us put out future episodes. So if you like what we're doing and want to donate some money, definitely we encourage that.
And who's doing our closing music today, Kevin?
Oh, today we have a song from Hiosphoros. Is that how it's pronounced?
I'd say Hiosphoros.
You can say it that way. Tomato, tomato.
It's
he has
not
sent
tomato,
us.
tomato.
He sent us
games.
a song called CX, spelled CEYX. He was nice enough to send us a song to close this episode out with. He is a very good chiptune artist from back in the day.
He is an old timer too. He's been doing this since like late 90s, early 2000s. So
yeah. So it's nice to feature him. So it's an honor, and check it out. We appreciate all you guys hanging out with us for so long. Thanks for tuning in.